how quickly military operations could swiftly defeat the Iranian regime. Obviously, right now we're at a point where you have Trump and Hegseth and others claiming that the Air Force is defeated, the Iranian Navy is in shambles, and other targets are on the way. But there's still very much uncertainty around how long this could last, how long it could take for the U.S. to at least declare that the mission has ended and to pull out and hopefully get ships moving again and erase the further threat of the human death toll that's mounting.
Well, what do we understand, Michelle, at this moment of Iran's capabilities? To your point, the president and other members of his cabinet saying that they've done a lot of damage to the country and their capabilities, but there was that great Bloomberg big take, this idea that they have all of these cheap drones at their disposal.
Well, exactly, Danny, and I think that's something I was actually going to refer to, that big take and some other work by our defense analysts within Bloomberg. We do know, that has been the challenge, and that's something that a lot of defense contractors have talked about is, we've got a lot of these big missile interceptors and weapon systems to defend against drones and missiles, but in the end, you're using these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of systems that are more limited at the high end to defeat these very cheap drones. So, it's not publicly known how much Iran has left in its arsenal, even of this sort of cheaper weapons that it's been using. So, I don't think we know with any certainty how long they could last. But certainly we're hearing from, again, Trump and Hegseth and others in the administration that, Iran is on its last legs. Now, we don't know, again, and this is something that Trump has been very forthright about, we don't know who comes after Khamenei, if he is somehow targeted, and they've said he's wounded, and this morning said that he was disfigured. So, we could be at this kind of never-ending cycle of targeting Iranian leadership that is unfriendly to the U.S. So, a lot of questions still to be answered, and I think that's what you're seeing, certainly across markets, is that there's just no certainty in terms of relief in sight.
Michelle, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's Michelle Giamrisco. And speaking of the market reaction, which she was just referring to, we've also seen oil volatility spike to the highest level since 2020 as the war in Iran continues to fuel uncertainty in markets, so now moving higher than Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Joining us now is Amy Silverman, RBC Capital Markets Head of Derivatives Strategy. Amy, I wonder what you're seeing underneath the surface right now, especially in volatility markets, the desire to hedge or to just hold on to anything as the price action has been punishing.
So not surprisingly, I guess, volatility has really repriced when you look at normalized skew levels. So again, that demand to hedge, Danny, that is really near all-time highs, not only just on a one-year basis, but even when we pull back further in time. And I will tell you, that's really a flip in the narrative from last year, which was all about the right tail, all about more momentum to the upside. We've really seen a change back to what I would say is more traditional markets, doing a lot of worrying, a lot of angst. You see that in the term structure, and I would say most conversations that I'm having is about how this might be prolonged. And you see that.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. And we are on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Simulcasting on X Spaces, so please help support the work that I do by making sure that you subscribe to the channels. You can also subscribe to and follow me on X and GETTR, Substack, TikTok, Buy Me a Coffee. Share the links, ask your social media to follow me. And if you want to help support the work that I do, you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos to get to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. With that said, the big news last night was the refueling aircraft that crashed in Iraq. Early this morning, around 4 o'clock or so, I received notification that there were 4 crewmen or women, but that died from that incident, and 2 need to be still recovered. So there's still a recovery operation that's taking place in Iraq. It looks like there was just a normal refueling of a bomber. The bomber, I believe, clipped its rear tail and was able to land. But the actual refueling aircraft crashed. And that's the reason why there were 4 crew members that died and 2 that are wounded. As of right now, we don't know the full state of the other 2 crew members, but my understanding is it's 4 dead, 2 wounded. And it was just through a normal fueling operation. It wasn't knocked down by friendly fire or adversary fire. So with that, oil markets are stable. Brent did go up last night, but then it came back down. We're right now trading at 94.38. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,696, and VIX is at the 25 handle. Euro USD is trading at 1.147, so the dollar is strengthening relative to the euro. And the Japanese yen is trading at 159.16, which is approximately what it was trading at yesterday, at about this time period. Bitcoin's trading at 74,000, and natural gas is trading at 3.12. Last night, natural gas was going up, but now it's trading down. UCO, which is an ETF leveraged to long oil, that's trading at 39.14. Gush, which is a long ETF for energy exploration and production companies, that's trading at 37.26. So equities, when the market went up in the early session, right now it's 10.24. So at 9:30, equities came up a decent amount, but now it's starting to fade. So we're losing a little bit of momentum there. And at about the same time period, energy has been ticking up a little bit. Now the question is will energy continue to move closer to $100 a barrel? Or will it kind of start trading more in the low 90s? Right now it's 94.39. So let's say 95, just average it out to about 95. Will it trade above 95 or below 95? There usually is an event risk, negative event risk, right? So on the weekend. So I wouldn't be surprised that in Asian session on Sunday that oil trades up. What I do is I closed a long position. I have many short positions in energy that are starting to build up. Now the question is will this war start to move closer and closer to completion? Everyone's waiting for at the end of the month, right? That's 2 weeks away. So I think right now is like a safe bet to like just be in and out of oil long, but don't like be in oil with a long position for many days. It's more of an in and out type of situation. And to wait it out to see what happens at the end of the month. If things seem to be stabilizing, especially with flows through the strait, then oil will start to drop. But if at the end of the month it seems as though it's chaotic and there's no resolution on opening up the Strait of Hormuz, then oil will start to tick back up. So for me, for long positions, unless some major news happens, I'm just going to wait it out until Monday, see what happens, and then place position. All right, with that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will help with your immune system. Magnesium also increases the efficacy of vitamin D3, and magnesium and zinc will help with your brain function. talking about brain function, you can also improve your brain function with vitamin C and magnesium. But you get added benefits by taking vitamin C and magnesium. You're boosting up your immune system and helping with your skin. You can stack them together. So please go to my store and get the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium. It's really important to improve your immune system and improve your brain function. All right, with that said, let's listen in to Al Jazeera.
And this is something I think for the American audience, maybe also a secondary, target could be to somehow. In the Iranian society, specifically at the time that this aligns with the recent attacks in different civilian infrastructure here in the capital city or other cities across the country, and targeting some checkpoints, which somehow hint that there might be some efforts to bring a sense of chaos or intimidation to the country.
But you mentioned what we saw on Iranian state television a little earlier this morning, showing thousands of people across the Islamic Republic taking part in the annual Al-Quds Day. Were you surprised to see so many Iranians joining the rallies in Tehran, despite the strikes, the ongoing strikes that they're facing in their country?
Well, maybe the initial, perception from the American side was that against the backdrop of recent political, economic protests in the country, if they attack the country, people would join them to uprise against the political system. But interestingly, I was seeing, even yesterday, that some people who were expressing dissatisfaction during the economic protests, they last night joined the gatherings in order to condemn the foreign aggression. So this indicates that classically and traditionally in Iranian society, at the time of a foreign aggression, they unite around the flag, and they seem to be somehow united against that foreign intervention. That's why Iranian officials and elite interpret this as a failure for the United States. They thought that a regime change could be coming as a result of this aggression, but it turned out to be somehow, again, backing for the political establishment. And this is something which is, Tehran is saying that has made the United States upset and angry. That's why they are, even we had explosions or bombings near to those, big gatherings here in the capital city. But people were not intimidated, and they started to chant slogans against the United States and Israel.
Yesterday, of course, we heard from the new Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei for the first time. He made a lengthy statement, which was read out on state media. The message painted a picture of defiance with no off-ramp for the war. This sort of fighting talk, do you think it's aimed at the United States and Israel, or do you think Iran is genuinely preparing for a long war?
Well, I think the prospect of the ongoing conflict is a bit ambiguous, because the United States is seeking for an outcome which has not been able to, to achieve. And they want something to define and to manufacture as a sign of victory.
Okay, there's a breaking news.
In the meantime, Iran also is trying to...
There's breaking news by BBC. U.S. confirms all 6 crew members dead after refueling plane crashed in Iraq. Early this morning, they had confirmation of 4, but now it has been confirmed that 6 crew members have passed due to the refueling crash in Iraq.
They can make sure that there will be no future aggression against the country. So that's why Iran is trying to make sure that there will be a new security architecture in place, and that this is something about not just the current ongoing war, but about the future of the regional order. And I have been hearing from officials in Tehran saying that the regional order will not be the same as in the past, and it will change. And that's why we are seeing both sides trying to somehow dictate their own terms for the future coming order. And that's why Iran thinks that it needs to inflict enough costs to the other side in order to make sure that in the future upcoming order and arrangement, its security will be and the peace will be guaranteed.
Okay, Abbas Aslani, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies, speaking to us there from Tehran. Thank you. Okay, you're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. The U.S. Defense Secretary Pete.
Okay, we're going to go to MS now. They're talking about the worries about the strait being clogged up. But before I do, please go to my store, help support the work that I do. These videos are all free. Please get the great products that I offer. You can get the structural nano silver soaps. They will help to neutralize and to help the health of your skin. These are soaps that you should be using every day. Very high quality. You can get it in lemongrass and also in peppermint. But again, it helps to neutralize, and that's super important, especially during the winter season or the cold season. And for brain function, it's really important to take the proper supplementation. I have Clarity Factor, which is a very powerful neurostack, which will help to get rid of brain fog. You will feel the effects of this within the first or second day of taking this. It'll get rid of that brain fog. Make sure you drink it with filtered water. Take it every day. It will also help to improve your memory, and you will think faster. And what will happen is that your dendritic connections will increase between neurons. The more neural connections that you create, actually, the better your brain will function. Clarity Factor will help with that. So get the Clarity Factor and help your brain function. You can stack it also with the magnesium supplements that I have. And Goodnight Formula. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. This will help to get you into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. So you're detoxifying your central nervous system. You're consolidating memory, and you're going to be well rested. When you have proper sleep, you're slowing down the aging process. And why? A lot of people would say, why is proper sleep, getting proper sleep, slowing down the aging process? Well, you're consolidating memory through deep sleep and REM sleep. If you're not getting deep sleep or REM sleep enough throughout the night, you're not consolidating memory, and therefore your hippocampus is going to start to shrink. And you're detoxifying your central nervous system. If you don't detoxify your central nervous system through good sleep, eventually a lot of garbage and lipofuscin will start to build up, and your neurons won't function properly. And if there's a lot of stress on the neuron, then proteins will misfold and plaque will build up, and it's called amyloidosis. So on top of getting amyloidosis, you also have dendritic connections that start to recede. So it's really important to make sure that you get a good sleep. So get the Goodnight Formula, take it every night, and make sure in the morning you take the Clarity Factor. That's a very powerful stack, neural stack. All right, with that, let's listen into MSNBC, or MS Now as it's rebranded.
Designed to move you.
From Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane. So Jonathan Lemire, a lot to discuss in there. We'll get to the media criticism in just a moment, but our question coming in was what to do about the Strait of Hormuz. And Secretary Hegseth said, we're not going to allow the Strait of Hormuz to remain closed. We're going to get the energy flowing. How you do that is a completely different matter. He suggested that one of the 3 objectives that the administration has laid out is destroying the Navy. He believes that by destroying the Navy completely, the Strait of Hormuz can open up, but also somewhat downplaying the impact there, saying that some ships can move through there, contradicting what the oil markets are telling us this morning.
Yeah, the ships that have gone through, though, are carrying oil to China, not to the rest of the world. Secretary Hegseth.
First of all, the tankers aren't moving because most of the tankers, let's put it that way. Some tankers are moving, but most of the tankers aren't moving because they can't get insured, or the staff, the sailors on the tankers don't want to move it because they don't want to get blown up.
And so it's clogged on both sides of the strait, in the Persian Gulf and in the Gulf of Omar. So the reality of the situation is that they can move, but they can't get insured because Lloyd's of London isn't willing to insure them. Again, the British afraid to actually do something. So when Pete Hegseth did say they could move, that's a true statement. They just don't want to because they're afraid.
Hysterical performance, really angry, it seemed, throughout much of that briefing. Said at the Strait of Hormuz, quote, "We don't need to worry about it." But yet, the rest of the administration is deeply worried about it. That's why we're seeing things like sanctions be lifted on Russia because oil prices are so high. And they are concerned about the ability to safely send ships to and through that strait. There's active consideration of having Navy vessels provide.
See, this is a
escorts
classic
there.
example. Here's a classic example of MS Now, which is a rebrand of MSNBC. They've been never Trumpers. A lot of these people are tied to Morning Joe, who hates Trump. And they're never on Team America, ever. They're looking for something to complain about. Why can't they say something positive? Why can't they be on Team America? No, they can't. They got to be on Team Iran.
And Willie, we should just take a moment to note, as you just said, the media criticism here from Secretary Hegseth. It took about 3 seconds to levy his first shot at the media. He suggested that CNN will be better once David Ellison takes charge of it. That's the merger that's currently being considered. And just in striking contrast to what we...
But the thing is that the media is looking, mainstream media is looking for anything wrong with Trump and his administration or how Pete Hegseth is conducting the war. The Secretary of War is doing a pretty damn good job. Now, one of the, Matt, one of the hosts in the morning show for Bloomberg, I listen to him a lot, all right? And he's a decent anchor on Bloomberg. But today, he was trying to talk down Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is a lot smarter than Matt, all right? Double Ivy League, served his country, all right? Matt's not, from Bloomberg. So these people are talking, trash about Hegseth. Hegseth's actually pretty bright. Hegseth actually has a high IQ. Now, he's, a little rough, on the edges, probably because of his military service. But there's nothing wrong with that. And he wants to kill the enemy. So don't you want a Secretary of War that says, I'm going to kill the enemy? Or you want the Secretary of War saying, well, we're really worried about how the markets are acting today. We're really worried about how the equities are selling off. No, conduct the war, kill the enemy. And that's what Pete's doing. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? See, the reason why we are in the situation we're in is because we had a lot of weak leaders. So worried about how it might hurt the oil market, how it might hurt the financial markets, how it might disrupt the supply chain. Maybe there would be a wider war. And years went by, decades went by, almost 50 years, almost half a century went by where we were afraid to knock out Iran. Now it's time. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with putting on your Caesar hat and going into Gaul and chopping their fucking heads off? What's wrong with that? No. You got a bunch of people on mainstream media that are low IQ and they're looking for something to complain about. Now, I believe that Trump and his Pentagon, the Pentagon, hasn't been fully divulging information that they've had to explain about the real situation with the wounded, especially on the first day and the second day. Because it seems as though there were about 140 people that were wounded. Most of them, 80 to 90% of them, went back into service, all right? Went back to their stations, wherever they're serving. But that should have been communicated to the American public immediately. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. That's not being honest. And that reminds me of what was happening during the years of the Vietnam War. And Hegseth made a statement today saying he will show higher fidelity in terms of what the composition of the casualties are. You know, if they're dead, if they're wounded and can't serve anymore, you know, permanently discharged, or they, you know, they're in recovery, whatever the data is. So he's fixing the problem. But these people that talk down Pete Hegseth, that's not a good idea, because Hegseth is actually a really bright person. Now, you know, he is a little rough on the edges. You know, he's not as polished as he could be. But I'd rather have what he is to kill the enemy than, let's say, Rumsfeld, that literally fucked up the Middle East post 9/11. All right, would you rather have Rumsfeld with the unknown unknowns and the known knowns and the unknown knowns, and would you want those snowflakes? Is that what you want? You want Rumsfeld? Or do you want Pete Hegseth? Pete Hegseth literally within 13 days has done more than 20 years of what the military did through different secretaries of defense. So don't bet against Pete. He's a pretty bright guy. Rough, a little rough on the edges, but, you know, even a diamond is rough till you polish it.
Have come to expect from Pentagon briefings in previous administrations, or even from, frankly, General Kane, providing far more of the factual updates of a war that, despite Secretary Hegseth complaining that the media is saying is widening, he said that in one breath, and in the next saying, well, actually, yes, we're escalating our strikes. It's the biggest day yet. That's the very definition of a conflict problem.
And John, you have to just point out, as you said, the contrast, which is that General Kane, when he second took the mic, immediately talked about the 4 American service members killed in Western Iraq when a refueling plane, an Air Force KC-135, crashed. To open, it took Defense Secretary several minutes. He first complained about the media, whined and started to rewrite cable news banners, suggesting what they should say versus what they have said based on reporting, and then later got to the acknowledgement of the death of those 4 service members. Sort of tells you the whole story about where his mind is, deeply worried about the way the war is being perceived, the way he's being talked about, perhaps. That seemed to be throughout the briefing front and center to him. But again, some of the headlines are Secretary Hegseth saying, we're going to get oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. Remains to be seen how that happens. He said today, the most strikes since the war began, up 20% in his assessment. He also said that there will be a thorough investigation into the attack on a girls' school that killed some 170 people, and made a suggestion that perhaps the new supreme leader of Iran is at least gravely wounded. I'll put it that way, because the message that the supreme leader put out yesterday was a written message. He's right about that, and we haven't actually seen the new supreme leader out in public. So a lot to sift through there, John.
Yeah, certainly. And there have been reports that this new supreme leader has been injured. You wanted to say perhaps disfigured. We don't know that. But certainly whether the new Ayatollah is actually calling the shots or not, certainly the regime remains in place. Hardliners are dictating the Iranian response. Let's now bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, who was watching alongside us for that briefing. David, two things in particular, please. First, the Strait of Hormuz. Again, the defense secretary saying no need to worry about it when we know, of course, that is what is consuming the administration right now, is trying to figure that out. And then also, you really flagged, there was a question there, and again, this was largely from a pretty friendly media corps, but a question from a Wall Street Journal reporter noting the uranium that Iran has and asking, well, part of the goals here is to make sure Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Well, what's the plan to secure that uranium, either militarily or diplomatically? The secretary had no answer.
He didn't have an answer. So again, in terms of the goals of the war, they don't have an answer on how they're going to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon forever. And our colleagues have been talking to sources in Israel. There's a broad desire in Israel to get that uranium, to either change the regime or get that. It's only 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium. So it's not clear how they're going to do that. And then just most importantly on the Strait of Hormuz, we have reporting. I spoke to former naval officers and experts yesterday. The White House did not carry out sufficient planning for what Iran would do in the Strait of Hormuz. They could have anticipated this. And the bottom line is that they don't have enough ships. So there's basically the two carriers in the Arabian Sea. There's about a dozen ships around them. And there are destroyers. And the smaller ships defend the carriers if there's any incoming missiles. Pete Hegseth is making a decision to keep the ships there and continue this record number of airstrikes that he apparently thinks is going to cause the unconditional surrender of Iran. Air power has never done that in history. And so yesterday we had the energy secretary saying that they hope to have escorts by next month. So that's another 2 weeks of no oil getting out that's going out to the world market. Right now, the only oil that's getting out is Iranian, going to China. And, you know, I just want to point out, don't worry, everything's fine. I mean, this is the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch. And right here, it's the largest one-day rise in the price of oil to $100 since 2022. And this overall is the largest disruption in the global oil market in history since, and it's a great dynamic global oil market. That is a failure of the White House and the Defense Department to plan for this. They should have spent more ships. There's been years of criticism of the Navy for not making more ships that can clear mines. And it doesn't matter that you've destroyed all the Navy ships that Iran has. Just one last point. General Kane said that the tankers that have been hit by surface-to-surface missiles. Those are hidden on the coast of Iran. There are also drones they can fire at ships. So Iran has a multi-layered way of stopping ships from going through the Strait of Hormuz. We didn't plan for that, apparently. Taking out all their ships doesn't mean they can't fire surface-to-surface missiles. So this is a huge problem economically for the administration.
And Secretary Hegseth may not be worried about the Strait of Hormuz, but the world is extraordinarily worried, and the oil markets and people paying gas in the United States are extremely worried about it. Also, we heard earlier this morning from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who said there would be escorts, U.S. naval escorts of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, raising some eyebrows there. No mention of that in this briefing with Secretary Hegseth and General Kane.
All right. Once again, mainstream media not on Team America. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lozenges and the drops. You can get it in Manuka honey and in orange splash vitamin C for the lozenges. And for the drops, you can get it in blueberry, honey and lemon, and also cherry flavor. So please go to my store, get the lozenges and drops. Once you have that throat irritation, take them right away to mitigate the problem. A lot of people don't realize you get sick on average 2 to 3 times a year. Now, for the average person, it will take 2, even if it's a benign cold, it will take 2 weeks after clearing the cold for your tissues and your cells to remodel, to repair. That means that your body's either sick or remodeling 9 weeks out of the year. This is the reason why that if you're sick all the time, once a year, twice a year, 3 times, you age faster. So if you can mitigate it and reduce the number of incidences or completely prevent them, then you slow down the aging process. And that's the only one vector of slowing down the aging process. So it behooves you to get the lozenges and the drops, neutralize
The moment you have that throat irritation, this is very important during the cold season and the allergy season. Because a lot of people don't realize, even if you have chronic allergies, you age faster. All right, let's listen in to let's see here. Fox News.
Finance the old way. Finance the ramp way. Something's different.
Meanwhile, let's talk about war. A simple weapon is allowing Iran to control, for the moment, one of the world's most important bodies of water, where 20% of the world's oil is transported through. So let's turn to the wall and to learn about sea mines. Fundamentally, what are they? They're supposed to detonate and blow open the hull of a ship. What have they done? They drop to the bottom, and oftentimes they're moored with wires. Those wires, on the positive side, can be cut, and they can be disabled. But they can be down there, and they can be triggered. For example, they can count. Some of them can count, where they maybe one ship goes, the second ship goes, and it's scheduled for the third one, then it'll explode. Makes it tougher and tougher to figure out if that pathway is actually clear or not. Okay, to avoid triggering the magnetic mines, hulls are now changed to the material in which they're made. They've gone to fiberglass in some cases, and believe it or not, Back to the Future with wood. And here they go into the seabed. Here's how they do the damage. An exploding mine creates a gas bubble and shock waves that can tear a hole in a ship's hull. And once one is blown up, all traffic stops. A fear of being blown up has basically stopped all the traffic in the area. Just a few barges have gotten through. Let's bring in retired U.S. Navy Admiral and FDD Senior Fellow, Mark Montgomery. Admiral, the mines, they say, according to the studies, there's roughly only 9 or 10 mines in the strait. But it's the fear of those mines that's keeping the tankers out.
Yeah, Brian, you're exactly right. That's a great description and great storyboard you had there, with all 3 different types of mines. What it is these mines right now, they have not laid a minefield per se. These are a small number that need to be swept and then cleared either by Navy divers putting explosives on them or the littoral combat ships removing them. But to do that, we need to set the military conditions in the strait. We need to remove the missiles, the drones, the fast attack craft as well. Once we've established those conditions, we can get in there, clear the mines, and then begin setting up vessel transit schemes that allow us to, to bring through the merchant ships, 2 or 3 ships accompanied by a U.S. Navy air defense destroyer.
So that is really the power right now that Iran has. They're going to control that strait. I understand India, according to the Wall Street Journal, has contacted their counterpart Iran, says, can you let our 23 ships get through? Do you think that's okay, you as an American commander, if some of our allies reach out and try to get separate deals?
I don't, obviously. I think that we need to stand firm here. The reason the president is pushing for this 4-week air campaign is so that at the end of it, one of the aims will be to control traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. If we don't do this, the message to the world and to our particular Arab partners is that Iran controls that strait and Iran has the power. So it's critical that we actually, as a global entity, defeat this Iranian threat to the straits and allow the United States to escort these ships through until we establish the conditions where escorts are no longer required.
How close do you think we are, Admiral? I know we got about 75% of the launchers out. We're destroying the production ability of those rockets, short, medium, and long-range rockets. How close are we to doing that? Some people think if we destroy the Navy, there's no problem, but we really worry about land attacks and drone attacks.
Exactly, and really small boat attacks, like the Ukrainians do in the Black Sea, with unmanned vessels packed with explosives. And you've seen a few of those already hit ships off of Dubai. Brian, I think that, Admiral Cooper and General Kane have been pretty clear. This was a 3 to 4 week air campaign. I would say somewhere between March 21st and March 28th is the time frame I'd look for our ability to escort ships.
And people just have to be patient. This is a problem that has to be addressed. And also,
70% of South Korea's oil goes through that strait. A lot goes to China. There are now gas lines in China, and maybe that has a lot to do with the very few overflights on Taiwan. So other countries and other regions are feeling that more than us, but it's a global market, so we're all being affected. So do you think pressure from China and other allies could help us straighten out that strait?
You know, I agree. I actually think China early on signaled to Iran not to do comprehensive wide-scale mining. In fact, normally they mine in the transit areas leading up, making it very difficult. I don't think that's happened. Look, Brian, this is a 47-year effort by the Iranian regime to take control of these straits. It's going to take 3 to 4 weeks for the United States to establish its dominance and be able to do the successful transiting. We've done it before. We did it in the 1980s. We can do it again now.
So great that we increased our production. We've changed everything since the 70s. We're really in control of our own energy output, but we do have to straighten out that strait and make the world know that that Iran will never be in control of that strait, even though they might be in control for the next few weeks. Admiral, thanks so much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take this stack. This is going to really slow down the aging process for you and target multiple systems. Turmeric. This brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. Ashwagandha root. Helps with stress levels, brings down cortisol, and it will help to control your blood glucose levels. And lignans. Soaks up free radicals, brings down inflammation, helps with the endocrine system. But these also help with the immune system by bringing down inflammation, by bringing down cortisol, by controlling your blood glucose levels. You're helping your immune system. You're boosting it up. And by soaking up free radicals, you're helping with brain function. You're helping with cardiovascular health. But they also benefit the cardiovascular health and the brain function by bringing down inflammation. So it's synergistic. Bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals is a major, major way to slow down the aging process and help different systems. So if you want to boost up your immune system, help with brain function, and help with your cardiovascular health, this is a very powerful stack. Now you can take them separately and you get lots of benefits from them. But if you stack it, if you take the turmeric, the ashwagandha root, and the lignans together, it's synergistic and you really supercharge the anti-aging and help with your cardiovascular health. You're reducing plaque formation. You're helping your neurons, reducing stress on the neuron. And you're boosting up your immune system. And you're helping your endocrine system on top of it. So it's a very powerful stack to help slow down the aging process. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you save $5. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into it's unbelievable, I'll tell you. Let's listen to Stephen Miller here.
You gotta have the best to be the best.
Deputy Chief of Staff and Homeland Security Advisor, Stephen Miller. All right, Mr. Miller, tell us about the progress of Operation Epic Fury.
Well, I think it's important for your viewers, Jesse, and the American people to know that there's never in history been a more total asymmetric, one-sided annihilation of the enemy than you are witnessing that is unfolding right now in Iran. Iran has long been feared by all the nations of the Middle East. It's long been believed to be one of the great military powers of the region, and yet the United States, under President Trump's leadership, has annihilated their navy, has annihilated their missile capabilities, has dealt devastating strikes to the IRGC and their command structure, has taken out, in collaboration and coordination with Israel, their nation's
sinister leadership and command structure. It has been a complete wipeout of the capacity to unleash violence on the world. And we are in the process right now of degrading their entire military industrial base so they cannot resume creating and building these weapons that not only could reach Europe, that not only could reach our military bases, but that someday could reach the mainland United States. So this has been, by every definition, an unprecedented military success against a regime that since 1979 has exported nothing but bloodshed and violence and claimed countless American lives.
Where does the administration stand on the objective of regime collapse? And are they satisfied with the current quote unquote leadership? Ayatollah Jr., I mean, we don't even really know if he's alive.
It's important to understand that, again, the leadership class of this evil regime has been wiped out. Nobody has seen the Ayatollah Jr. Nobody has seen proof of life. He didn't show his face on a TV camera. All we have is a statement that is purported to belong to him as a symbol and a signal of how degraded this regime is. And again, we're talking about how in a matter of days, a regime that has terrorized and menaced the world, that has used missiles to blackmail the world, has been degraded and has been set back to a degree that few thought possible. Ship after ship sunk, launcher after launcher destroyed, outpost after outpost, command center after command center taken off the map. So this has been a huge success for America, but the president is continuing to move forward to further annihilate, obliterate, and destroy the regime's capacity to threaten American interests around the world.
So when he sees the strait close and oil prices go to 100, what does the president feel about that? Like, what is his posture there?
Well, it underscores above all else, Jesse, how this was the last chance that the United States had to take action against a regime that was planning and plotting to kill Americans and that had the ability to strangle, if it wished, global commerce in the future, backed by long-range missiles, backed by nuclear weapons. So just again, as a thought experiment, imagine if this regime that right now, weaker than ever before, imagine if that regime instead had nuclear weapons, instead had long-range missiles that could reach an American city, instead was rich with cash. Remember, Obama put them on a path to enrich them with tens of billions of dollars and have a nuclear weapon right now. A rich regime that controls commerce through the Strait of Hormuz and has nuclear weapons, has long-range weapons. Think about what a terror that would be to global commerce and to the world. So instead you have is a dying regime, a decaying regime, a thrashing regime that is engaged in terrorism in the Strait of Hormuz. But let's be very clear. The United States, not Iran, has the staying power. Why? Iran produces 2% of the world's oil. America, under President Trump, is the #1 producer of oil and fossil fuel. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any other nation in the world, and now we're partnered with Venezuela. So the president is taking every action he can to lower prices. You mentioned, of course, unsanctioned oil that's at sea.
But he's not saying that the refineries in the world, a lot of them can't use our oil because we have light sweet crude and they need heavy crude. Their refineries are fine-tuned for heavy crude. So we can't export a whole lot of the crude that we get from there. When you fracture shale, you can get oil and gas. So there's oil shale and there's gas shale fracking. All right. A lot of the oil that we are exporting can't be used in certain types of refineries. Now, some refineries are fine-tuned for it, or they have to blend it. So it's a little bit more complicated. Or we're, shipping final product, downstream products. But the bottom line here is that we are a major energy producer. That doesn't mean that all the refineries in the world can take it. So this is the problem that I have with, just not looking at the nuance, not looking at the details. Because by looking at the details, you start to understand some more of the complexity of the problem.
Again,
get that into the market, continuing to push our own producers to drill and expand production as fast and as far as they can, providing regulatory relief, and you're going to see more and more in the days to come. Well, you asked earlier as well about the future of the regime, because I didn't want to leave that question hanging. The President's been clear on this point too, Jesse. The people of Iran have an opportunity, if they choose to take it, their last best chance to claim control of the future. But whatever choice they make, President Trump has been abundantly straightforward in saying the United States will pursue and achieve its military objective.
All right, makes sense to me, Mr. Miller. Thank you as always. We appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest.
All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the CNBC International. This was when they were discussing about current energy supply shocks. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the omega-3. This will help to bring down systemic inflammation and help you to control your lipid profile. This is very important to take every day to help with your cardiovascular health. And olive leaf extract. It's a dual-purpose supplement. It helps with improving your immune system and helps with your cardiovascular health. Brings down inflammation and helps to control the lipid profile. You can stack them together so you're improving your immune system and you are improving your cardiovascular health. Please go to my store, get the olive leaf extract and the omega-3.
All this, I almost hate to say it, right? Because Euro's crude from pariah is now gone to a prize position. It's trading at 80.
Yeah. Look, the other factor, I mean, of course, we have countries, we have to look at the level of inventory of oil in the countries, right? And there are certain countries, especially in the southern part of Asia, for example, India, where the oil import inventories are about 50 days as a cover of the imported volumes, right? Versus the North Asia is over 100 days. So clearly, having been able to source Russian crude is a cushion in the near term. But I think another factor to consider or to watch after this unwinds is how does the oil react from a positioning standpoint? Will there be a more sustained increase in the financial position, the next speculative length in oil, or a more sustained geopolitical premium? Second factor to keep in mind is about will the hoarding of crude increase? For example, China has built a lot of underground storage capacity in the last few years, but that's still 2/3 utilized. Once the barrels are flowing in, will they take all those barrels and build more inventories, for example? So I think those are the factors to also consider as we think about how the oil market shapes up post the unwinding of this.
I brought up India because there's been this back and forth, yes and no, between India as well as Iran on whether or not Iran is allowing Indian tankers to through the Strait of Hormuz. Why is this happening, do you think?
Look, India's import dependence on oil is over 80%, and a large part of that is flowing through Strait of Hormuz. So 40% of their imports are flowing in from Strait of Hormuz. So imports are flowing in from Strait of Hormuz. So that's a large dependence. Not just oil and gas market situation is even trickier. In the case of oil, we keep inventory between 50 days to over 100 days. But in the case of gas, import cushion is typically 2 to 4 days because gas is more expensive to store. So in a situation where, of course, oil dependence is high, but even in the case of gas, both LNG and LPG, India's import dependence coming in from Strait of Hormuz is relatively high. We're already hearing about the priority allocation changes in the Indian gas market. So clearly, with the energy situation right now, it is not surprising to hear the back and forth because I think India needs more oil and more gas, and the inventory cushion is relatively lower compared to the North Asian market.
Yeah, and it seems that every 2 years we are confronted with an energy security issue from COVID-19 to the Russia-Ukraine war, and now
consumer spending.
The last couple of weeks. Do you think that because it's been raised that the South and Southeast Asian countries have lower strategic reserves, that this could actually cause a rethink for many of these countries, and thus create perhaps another upside for oil in the medium to long term when they come out of this, whether it's in 2 months, 2 weeks, or say heaven forbid 2 years? You know, this could actually be something that markets will have to factor in as well.
No, absolutely. I think it's a very fair point. When you look at the ASEAN market, I think it's relatively mixed. We have countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, which are also large producer of oil and gas, but there are countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, which are net importer of energy, and level of inventory cushion is not as high as the North Asian countries. Japan, Korea is 200 days of oil inventory, for example. So how the countries react here, import-oriented countries react in building more storage appetite, hoarding more crude, I think that will become top of mind, and that will have implication as how the oil market pans out in the second half of the year. I think the other way to think about the implication here is energy security will also push the import-oriented energy countries to think more about building a strong grid and energy storage infrastructure, because a lot of these countries are going aggressive on the renewables as a strategy to become more self-sufficient on their energy imports. However, these renewables are not reliable without a very solid grid and without a proper battery or energy storage system. So I think that's the second layer of implication that these countries probably will go and think as we head into the energy security debate.
And could this actually prompt certain countries to start leaning more towards alternative or clean energies because of what's happened? It seems that there was these people saying that the peak of oil is over. We're starting to see a shift to renewables, and we've been reminded just how fragile that balance is at the moment. Could this actually prompt more countries perhaps even to rethink, hey, maybe we need to start leaning towards some of these clean energy alternatives, regardless of whether or not they are reliable or not?
Absolutely, and I think it's a very it's what we've seen in the prior supply shocks as well, especially after 22-23. We've seen a significant increase in the renewable penetration in some of these energy import-oriented countries. Look at China. China has achieved their 2030 renewable targets in 2024 itself. India, 50% of their power capacity is now renewables and hydro as a percentage of capacity mix. So we will see this continued acceleration into the renewable industry. However, the bottleneck most of these countries need to resolve is the grid and the storage, because when it comes to replacing fossil fuel with renewable, it is not like to like unless it can be made reliable around the clock. And that is why one of the major investment themes that will continue is investment in more grid-related infrastructure and equities, and also the battery and the energy storage solution will become.
So it's going to be more of the.
I'm Steve Ballmer, former Microsoft CEO and a basketball fanatic. But more than anything, I'm a data guy.
So it's going to be more of the question now is storage, and also make sure transmission is because that is the thing that comes a lot of power produced. Well, we can produce a lot of power, but if there's no grids that can transmit these efficiently or storage, then all of this production that we're going to create will come to move.
Absolutely. So renewable generation is not a bottleneck. I think a lot of countries have accelerated, and they will continue. I think it's just absorbing those renewables on the grid and making it reliable throughout the 24-hour day is the main bottleneck.
Nico, let's get to stocks if we could. I know you prefer upstream oil and gas exposure out here in Asia. Is that correct? You got names like CNOOC, also PetroChina on your buy list.
Yeah, so I'll not go specifically into equities, just because it's brought it from a thematic perspective. We think Asian oil equities.
I'm going to switch over to Bloomberg here, talking about U.S. consumer spending stalls, but also the sentiment of the consumer is somewhat weak because of the crisis with oil.
Real personal spending barely rose in January, up 0.1% as Americans cut back on goods and focused on essentials like healthcare. Core inflation increased 0.4% on the month, 3.1% from a year earlier. And this is the Fed's preferred gauge. This is the one that they need to get down to 2% per their own goals, but haven't been able to for many, many years. Let's find out what's wrong with them. We bring in Mike McKee, Bloomberg's international economics and policy correspondent. These are a group of really intelligent, accomplished, capable men and women who have a target that they haven't been able to hit for 5 years. What are they doing wrong, Mike?
Far be it for me to give them advice, because there's no open seats on the board, and so even if I'm right, I'm not going to get the job there.
Phyllis wouldn't even allow you to be.
No, he wouldn't.
Yeah.
They've been hit by a number of shocks. Obviously, the initial shock was the pandemic, and it sent oil prices up and energy prices up, and then we had an energy shock there that we're having again now, but we also had the tariffs tariffs come in, and that's played a big role. We are seeing a little bit of better news in that the headline number did come down a tick to 2.8% from 2.9, but as Matt said, the core up 3.1% during the month. Spending was weak but okay, up 0.4%. The good news in this report was wages and salaries were up 0.5% after being up just 0.1% in December. Now, what I just said there is important. December and January, these are December and January figures, so important but less relevant because all of this is before the war. So we don't have any impact of that in this data. Another thing that caught everybody's attention today was GDP halving, going to 0.7% in the fourth quarter from 1.4%. Consumer spending much weaker than thought. Business spending much weaker than thought. Real final sales.
I want to go over this slide here. GDP cut in half to 0.7% from 1.4% for fourth quarter. That's a big hit. Consumer spending falls to 2% gain from 2.4. So consumer spending is falling, GDP is falling, business spending is falling. It went to 2.2%. It was from 3.7%. Real final sales 0.4%. It was 1.2%. I think real final sales means, I'm not sure if that's real estate or not. Durable military aircraft, durables, and then military aircraft minus 23. I don't know what, minus 23%. Why is that? Let's see.
Perhaps better way sometimes of looking at this than GDP because it leaves out inventories and trade, falls to 0.4% from 1.2%. We also had a durable goods orders for January report that showed defense military aircraft orders were down 23.7%. You'd think that they might have thought of ordering more when they were planning all this.
Oh, that assumes planning.
Yeah.
Yes, that maybe says something within itself. By the way, I want to bring back up that screen you had showing PCE because of all the decimal points.
Oh, yeah.
Brought out there. I feel like we shouldn't let this go unnoticed because for January, 0.363. So I guess a softer result when you take it all the way out to the. Is this where we're back again?
Oh yeah,
that we're looking at all the decimal points to try to figure out how soft it is.
We're back to decimal points because of the rounding is important. It is the rounding that sent us up to 3.1%, and so the Fed has to pay attention to how much the month over month has actually changed. And unfortunately, it doesn't change by much, but we have to put all those tests.
But with all of these, Mike, I just constantly worry, especially given what GDP did and that inflation is still sticky. If we're getting to a point where the inflation coming from the war is bad enough, or even are contemplating a hike, wouldn't that assume that growth is taking a really big hit too? That this isn't the energy shock of 2022?
Well, interestingly enough, the yield curve has flattened. And the reason it's flattened, even though we are expecting more inflation, is that bond traders are beginning to price in the idea of a real economic slowdown. So that's why the long end has been coming down. The short end has just basically stayed where it is because nobody thinks we're going to be cutting rates anymore. The market has priced out the idea of any rate cuts for 2026. And if you look far enough out, end of 2027, they're pricing in a rate increase now. There's not going to be any statistical validity to that, but it's an interesting turnaround from where we were, where it was just a straight line down for.
Why not increase rates now? I mean, if you are shown data that you're still 50% above your target 5 years into the campaign,
because the job market isn't doing so well. That's why.
Do something.
You're definitely not getting unemployed.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, we're still looking at unemployment that's what 4.5%, even lower than that.
I don't think the president wants anybody who's raising rates, but there's two things at work here. One is that we don't know what is going to happen if the economy is going to weaken significantly because of all of what's going on. Then you don't want to be raising rates because that's just going to put an extra weight on the scale on that side. But at the same time, there are two camps, and the question is, do you think that where the Fed is now is high enough? to continue putting pressure on it, on the inflation rate and bring it down. That's where the hawks are at the moment, because nobody's talking about rate increases. The doves think that we're too tight and the economy is going to suffer from that. And so that's the debate that's going to have to play out.
I get it. I just wanted to play devil's advocate
I like it.
for a moment.
Yeah.
You know, because at some point, I want to be able to take our officials at their word that they really are aiming at that target. You know,
We're having that debate in Europe. ECB is starting to get hikes priced in, as is the BOE. So not completely crazy to ask the question of why not the US.
Well, Japan we knew is raising rates, but Australia I was looking at this morning, they're also it's priced in for rate increases. So the rest of the world in a kind of a different position because they don't have all the oil that we have. So the impact on them is going to be much worse with inflation.
You probably know Vistaprint for business cards because we printed them for millions of small businesses over the past 25 years. But we also print signs, stickers, shirts, and more. If you need it, we print it. Print it all with 20% off for new customers at Vistaprint.com.
Alrighty. Let's see here. Let's listen into the broadcast from Live Now about the 6 U.S. crew dead from the refueling plane crash over Iraq. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. I tell you how to improve your health, but I also tell you what's happening in the markets due to the breaking news. And right now, oil is slightly ticking up. It's at 95.79. And as oil ticks up, the equity market starts to sell off. It's now 6,669 for the S&P 500. Now, there is a support level at 6,600 for the S&P 500, and there's also a major support level at 6,450. So it's time to buy equities and start accumulating some shares, because once this is all over, the equity market is going to go up. Please go to my store and get the digestive probiotic, digest probiotic that I have. This is a veggie cap version. I also have a powdered version. But taking a probiotic is really important. Why? Because by improving your gut biome, you're improving your health. You're improving your brain function. You can also improve your immune system and your metabolism. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. So, and you're going to be able to sleep better. So please go to my store and get the probiotics, either the veggie cap form or the powdered form. I prefer taking the powdered form because I take all these different powders for my supplementation. The digestive enzyme complex will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and bring down the stress on your pancreas. You don't want to be a Steve Jobs, do you? All right? A lot of people don't realize that as you age, no matter how healthy you are, your pancreas is also aging and can't produce the enzymes as efficiently. So it's important to take care of your pancreas and the health of your pancreas. Digestive enzyme complex will do that. It'll help to break up the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the lipids and allow you to absorb those. Now, if you are an athlete, you will also benefit from digestive enzyme complex because it will allow you to break up your fuel source pre or post workout. So please go to my store, get the digestive enzyme complex. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. And vitamin B complex. The first 4 B vitamins in here will help with the electron transport chain within your mitochondria, so it boosts up your energy levels. It boosts up ATP. That's a major energy molecule that your cells need, and it makes a lot of it. So you're gonna improve your energy levels and your cellular metabolism. And vitamin B complex will help to protect your neurons through vitamin B12. So please go to my store, protect your neurons, help with your cellular metabolism, boost up those energy levels. This is a great way to slow down the aging process. So if you're 40 years of age, male or female, you should be taking vitamin B complex like now. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex, get the digestive enzyme complex, and get the probiotics, either the veggie cap form or the powdered version.
Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Now about the latest on Operation Epic Fury, I do want to bring you the sad breaking news that we are learning as U.S. Central Command confirming that all 6 of the U.S. service members on board a refueling aircraft have died after a crash over in western Iraq. Again, we are just getting this update coming in from CENTCOM. The crash itself is still under investigation, but the U.S. military says this was not due to hostile fire or friendly fire, and the identities of the service members could be released later today once family has been notified. Again, U.S. Central Command just putting this out here, confirming sadly that all 6 of the people on board that aircraft have died. Right now, I do want to bring in a great friend of the show here. We have Matthew Wiz Buckley, a retired Navy F-18 fighter pilot, Top Gun graduate, and founders of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation to talk more about this. And Wiz, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Morning, Josh. Sad day, but thanks for having me.
Of course. And I'm hoping you can start by maybe telling us a little bit about the aircraft that's involved here. It's a KC-135. Can you explain for folks out there what that is?
Absolutely. So a KC-135 is a Boeing 707. It started life as an airliner, and we've turned it into a flying gas station. So a KC-135 is a huge aircraft, 4 engines, flown by the United States Air Force, the Air Force Reserve, and the Air National Guard. Now, it sounds like it was 2 tankers, 2 KC-135s over Iraq, and they were either rendezvousing or they were in the middle of doing tanker-to-tanker refueling. So one tanker can top off the other tanker as it leaves station to go back to base. So mid-air collision, it sounds like. I've seen the pictures of the other KC-135, the vertical stab. Not half of it is knocked off. So, Josh, this could have happened in peacetime. This was not hostile fire. And sadly, when I saw the reports hit last night, I knew there wasn't going to be any survivors. So the KC-135 doesn't have ejection seats. They took the parachutes out years ago. So there's more or less no escape for these crews. So God bless the 6 airmen who were lost and their families. I've refueled off these KC-135s hundreds of times. I probably refueled off of both of those aircraft. It was a welcome sight. I would launch off the boat, the Abraham Lincoln, and we'd hit the tanker over Saudi Arabia to top off before we'd fly into Iraq for our missions. And then a very welcome sight, topping off, seeing them on the way home, back out to the boat. It was always cool, Josh, joining up with these tankers because they always had their state on the tail. So I'd see the Alabama flag or North Carolina or Alaska, and it just kind of made me smile. Here we are over the skies of the Middle East, and there's my fellow Americans from a sister service. So it's just heartbreaking. It's very sad today.
And I wanted to ask you here about the statement that was put out by CENTCOM, because they were very quick to make sure that everyone knew this was not hostile fire, this was not friendly fire. Why is that so important to ensure that gets out there right away to folks?
Well, it's sad, Josh, that they even have to do that, right? Because obviously, immediately online, just people are awful, right? They're no, it was shot down, and they're lying to us, and that's the media go-to, folks. We don't fly aerial refueling aircraft anywhere near hostile fire or the hostile zone. That's what fighter aircraft are for. That's what bombers are for. These are the backbone of military aviation. They fly over friendly sky, and they are kept away from any sort of hostile environment for this very reason. They're a flying gas station, and they are unprotected. So sadly, CENTCOM always has to include, if that's the case, that this was not hostile fire. But, Josh, it's just a sad state of affairs when people automatically assume they're lying. Even though you can see the other tanker that they hit landed safely, I believe, at Ben Gurion in Israel, and you can see it was a mid-air collision. It wasn't surface fire, surface-to-air fire, it wasn't friendly fire, it wasn't any of the above. It was a mid-air collision. Sadly, when you get 2 big airplanes like that in the same piece of sky, potentially bad things happen.
Now, of course, as you'd imagine, there will be an investigation of sorts that will have to take place. So how does something like that work? Again, this is early on. This just happened hours ago. Everything kind of being pieced together at this point. We know that the service members who died in that crash, they have not been publicly identified just yet. Families still have to be notified. So when does an investigation kind of start here, and how does that work?
Josh, it started immediately. I've been sitting at the duty desk in a fighter squadron when there's been a mishap, and you literally reach over next to the phone for a binder. There is a mishap binder. You go to page 1, it says step 1, and you start going through the process. So Josh, I guarantee you, as soon as these pilots and the air crew were safe on deck, they were on the phone or they were greeted, and the investigation, I guarantee you we know already more or less exactly what happened, but obviously we're not going to put that out immediately until it goes through the formal channels, and especially, Josh, until the families are notified. This is a horrific loss. There were people, there were families and loved ones, husbands, wives, who got a knock on the door last night. It's just absolutely horrifying for these families. So the investigation will play out. The results will be released, but whenever 2 airplanes hit, it's a pretty quick investigation, obviously.
And I have to ask, because there are a lot of misinformation pieces, disinformation that float around. You kind of touched on this off the top, but what is maybe a piece or several pieces of misinformation about a situation like this, what we saw, that you want to make sure folks out there fully understand?
Well, Josh, the people who don't believe this right off the bat, like we're lying or something like that, are playing into the enemy's hands.
Right.
I've already seen your Iranian outlets
this is
the
problem with so many of those damn podcasters out there and ones that are posting on X. They're these armchair, type generals, that think they know it all, and that everything's fake and blah, blah, blah. It's time to get on Team America, because if you don't get on Team America and we lose our constitutional freedoms, if we lose our hegemonic power in the world, do you think that you're going to have freedom? Do you think you'll have your constitution? Do you think that you'll have the economic prosperity that you live under for all your life? No. So you better start getting on Team America here. And that's the sad thing about these people like Scott Ritter and Mearsheimer and these generals that are being interviewed on certain podcasts. These podcasts that are interviewing these individuals, also Jeffrey Sachs and even Ian Brenner. These individuals, they're not on Team America. They try to spin it in a way where there's going to be absolute failure by the United States. Scott Ritter totally got it wrong on what happened in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Syria. The Israelis won. Scott Ritter thought that the Israelis it would be their Vietnam. Didn't happen. Scott Ritter also thought that the United States would not be successful with our first bombing run on the nuclear facilities. He got that wrong too. And Scott Ritter is going to get this one wrong too. Get on Team America. Scott Ritter is a fucking Marine. What the hell's wrong with him? Team America. Because if we lose, then you might as well flush your freedoms and your retirement and your prosperity down the toilet. Because the life that we live is because of our hegemonic projection. That's just a fact. You think that people are, you'll notice in the media, as the stock market starts to go down, and right now it's trading at 6,654. So it's getting close to that support level of 6,600. And oil is trading up right now, as we speak, at 96 handle. It was trading at the 94 handle earlier in the broadcast. So as oil's going up and equities are going down, you're going to start hearing more negativity in the mainstream media. You're going to hear more negativity with these podcasters. It's an industry. Tucker Carlson's one of them. It's an industry to talk trash about the United States. And Tucker, says that he's been here for so long and that, he's part of the Swanson family. Tucker, my family in the United States has been here a hell of a lot longer. All right? And oh, by the way, my family's done more than your family has. So, the reality of the situation is that you got people like Tucker that has a huge following talking trash about America. Get on Team America now. When she needs you, why does Tucker deserve prosperity? Why? Why? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be critical on certain things. I'm critical on Trump. But we have to win Iran. We have to win. We cannot lose. Get on Team America. Come on, Tucker. Get on Team America.
Enemy at this point, folks, if you're believing that sort of propaganda. This was a mishap, like I said, that could have taken place over the middle of the United States, a mid-air collision. Josh, look at the Air Force Thunderbirds or the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. Those airplanes fly inches apart, and they swap paint every once in a while. So mid-air collisions happen. This was not enemy fire, and it's just a sad state of affairs when people immediately rush to judgment. You and I, geez, what was it? Seems like forever ago, but we talked, was it last week with the Kuwaiti shoot down of the 3 F-15E Strike Eagles? We had to immediately knock down that, they were shot down by Iran or this or that, just all the conspiracy theorists and the tinfoil hat folks. I know General Kane. I've known General Kane for over 2 decades. The man is a straight shooter, and we will always get the truth out of General Kane. And I know personally he's got to feel this. He feels every one of these deaths. He was an Air Guard guy. He's an Air Force guy. This hurts. This hurts everybody in the military. It should hurt every American today that these folks, again, will be coming home, sadly, to Dover Air Force Base.
And of course, our thoughts and our prayers are with their families here as they're learning this horrible news. Matthew Wiz-Buckley, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and kind of discuss this and break down, your...
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. And get the very high quality structural nano silver toothpaste. This will neutralize, help to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, bring down inflammation, improve the health of your gum line, and with good oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular health and your bowels. A lot of people don't realize that poor oral hygiene can cause problems cardiovascularly. So please go to my store and get this very high quality, the best toothpaste that you can get. Get a few tubes for your household and help support the work that I do. Also, I have structural nano silver gels. You can get it in a tube form or in a quick dispenser called Renew. It's dual purpose. You can apply it on your skin daily as a daily skincare. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, it'll help to heal the wound quicker, about a third of the time quicker. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, especially during the cold season, put it on your hands, around your eyes, around your ears, around your nose, around your mouth, lightly coat your nostrils. You'll stay active for 5.5 hours. You can't do that with Perel. This is the reason why, if you pay attention to me, you will be able to weather different types of situations and improve your health. Because if you're not sick all the time, if you mitigate that, you're slowing down the aging process. I 100% guarantee you, people that get sick chronically age faster. So if you pay attention to me, you will slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gels. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. We're going to go to France 24, U.S. media coverage of the war in Iran. Fact, fiction, and propaganda. This is France 24.
Days after the U.S. joined Israel in launching surprise attacks on Iran, and many American politicians still did not understand the Trump administration's justification.
There are times when you go into a classified session and you walk out and you have a better understanding about the gravity of the situation and the rationale behind the military action. This is not one of those times.
The administration also failed to convince the public. Most polls show Americans are either skeptical or flat out opposed to this war. But ahead of November's midterm elections, Republicans have been making media rounds trying to quell anger over rising gas prices.
Short-term disruption for the long-term gain. Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
Short-term pain for long-term gain.
Repetitive messages are often effective messages, and that's in stark contrast to the broader communication strategy. Politico's playbook wrote that, quote, government messaging during times of war is normally incredibly tight, with spokespeople parroting the official lines ad nauseum. There's no freelancing, no divergence of thought is permitted because the stakes are simply too high. Yet the past week from this administration has been the total opposite, and we're witnessing the results. Look at this clip put together by CNN.
And we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell.
And to be fair, the Trump presidency is not the first administration to have trouble calling a spade, prompting Reason Magazine to make this satirical video.
Welcome back to Is It War? World War I, war. Correct. World War II, war. Correct. The First and Second Iraq War. War. They identify as military action. It's a bit like pronouns, except we kill people. All right, how about Libya? War. I'm sorry, that was kinetic action, not a war. Iran. It's a war. We're doing war things. No, not war things. Preemptive retaliatory de-escalation action. No, that's not a thing.
It would almost be funny if it wasn't a war or was a war. You get it. And like with any war, there has been propaganda on both sides of the conflict. The White House was criticized for a video that mixed footage from the Call of Duty video game along with clips of American missile strikes inside Iran. And in the case of tit-for-tat trolling, a few days later, Iran released this AI-generated video replacing humans with Legos, blaming the U.S. and Israel for the attack on the girls' elementary school in Manaf. That strike occurred during the opening hours of the initial assault on Iran and killed more than 170 people, most of them schoolgirls. Now, the New York Times was one of several newsrooms, including CNN, the Associated Press, Bellingcat, to analyze satellite imagery, verified videos, and other material to conclude that the U.S. was likely responsible. CBS's Face the Nation is one of America's longest-running news programs. Since coming under new ownership, though, CBS has been accused of appeasing the Trump administration. When Democrat Tim Kaine was on, and his interview abruptly ended when he mentioned the school strike. Take a look.
So many Americans that are still being held in Iran. Do you have any idea what is being done to protect them?
I do not, and I fear about that. Look, if school kids are being killed in bombing, likely U.S. bombing, although the president and the Secretary of Defense are now trying to invent a claim that it was Iran. If school kids are being killed, I worry about the fate of U.S. citizens who are being held prisoners there.
Well, we know the military is investigating that, Secretary Hegseth has said in regard to the girls' school. We have to leave it there.
U.S. officials have tried to distance themselves from the school strike. Donald Trump even suggested that Iran may have bombed itself. The tragedy, though, did not go away. Here's Tucker Carlson, the conservative, contrarian, and conspiratorial talk show host.
You have to believe that was accidental, despite the fact it was hit twice, 40 minutes apart. It's very much like a double tap, which is to say a bombing and then an attack and people coming to rescue the injured. But as an American, you have to believe this was a tragic mistake. But we have to verify that, because if you wake up in the morning and you're living in the kind of country that thinks it's okay to kill not simply military officers, but their daughters, that country's not worth fighting for.
A preliminary U.S. military investigation has since found that the U.S. was responsible, saying it was due to a targeting mistake by military planners. And remember, back in 2016, Republicans said a vote for Democrat Kamala Harris was a vote for war, and a vote for Donald Trump was a vote for peace. Here's Jon Stewart.
That's why they voted for him, the doctrine, peace through strength. And now they support Trump for a very different reason.
The president's not afraid to take action with hard power when necessary.
The Iranian government found out what the Trump doctrine is all about, and that is mess around and find out.
Donald Trump has the guts, the balls, and the vision to do things that nobody else will do.
I'm going to leave the balls thing alone for now. But how quickly the right has gone from peace through strength to peace through war. And we're all just along for the ride in a war with no clear purpose, no end in sight. It's all just at the whims of Donald Trump.
Let's bring in our guest, Negar Mortazavi, an Iranian-American journalist and political analyst. Negar, thank you for patiently waiting.
Thanks for having me.
It's easy for journalism to get lost in the fog of war. What has struck you about U.S. media coverage?
Well, this is something that's not just limited to Iran. We've seen this all the way back to the invasion of Iraq, and now in the past 2 years, when it comes to Israel, the genocide in Gaza. First and foremost, the dehumanization of a population, which of course is part of the political rhetoric coming from officials, but that also leaks into the media coverage. Media, journalists, anchors, taking these comments from politicians at face value, and also not really showing the nuances of these societies that eventually their country ends up bombing or going to war or limited military action with. So I think it starts with dehumanization, and that's a gradual, slow process. And then also the coverage of, for example, the fact that this is a war of aggression. International institutions, the UN, they've called this unlawful. I mean, the reasoning for the war is still not clear for the American people. And I think the media hasn't done a very good job of really articulating and showing some of these contradictions that are coming. You expect this from politicians, of course, but I think the media can have a lot more scrutiny. And unfortunately, that doesn't exist when it comes to at least U.S. foreign policy, and especially towards that region. And the kind of coverage of friends and foes of the U.S. is very different.
Yeah, it's a very good point about dehumanization, but it's also perhaps somewhat difficult, because what you're dealing with here is the Middle East, where you have a lot of restrictions on the press there. So there aren't a lot of images coming out of Iran. So there aren't a lot of faces about who the enemy is or isn't. So how should newsrooms try to combat that dehumanization?
Absolutely. I mean, access is an important.
Meet your new favorite email design platform. Create stunning emails without touching a single line of code. With our editor and
Absolutely. I mean, access is an important issue, and also it's a cycle because the coverage is seen as skewed and not very objective. That also contributes to, at least on the case of Iran, and Iranians say, well, this coverage of us is so bad, we don't want these journalists in our country. And then it turns into a cycle, because I know a lot of well-intentioned American Western journalists who really are curious and want to go to the country and cover. We just had CNN send someone who did an excellent job of reporting on the ground at risk to personal safety. But it's a balancing fact. I would say journalists should try. It's a difficult war zone. These countries are more challenging, especially for American journalists. But it's also not impossible. We see people who can get in. Yes, it may be more difficult, more complex, but trying to navigate sort of that terrain and also that system to make sure you can get in, I think is part of the work and part of the job. And access is not zero, but of course it's limited, and that impacts the work.
Yeah, there's an alternative incident, because without access, there is another way to get Iranian voices, and that's to have Iranian voices in the United States that has the largest diaspora outside Iran. Are there enough Iranian voices on air or in the press in the United States?
We see Iranian voices in the US media and Western media, I would say in general, because I think this criticism also applies to European media, including France, but very much also focused in the US because this is the country that started the war. And I think the media is even helping the government in sort of manufacturing consent for the war to some extent, because this is a very unpopular war in the United States. When it comes to Iranian voices, there was a poll that just came out that showed that the community is split almost in half. Iranian Americans, 49% to 48% against and pro-war. But when you look at the US media, you only hear almost entirely from voices that are pro-war. I have seen this on CBS, on various other channels, that predominantly the voices that are the sound bites and the examples that you see from the community, the diaspora, are the pro-war voices. It is an outsized voice. It's that side, that half of the community has more, access to the media, to the speaker phones, and more active rallies, etc. But we also know that the other half of the community is very much anti-war, and I think that's even more representative of inside Iran, because the people who are already under these bombs and actually dealing with the actual war also are increasingly becoming against it. So not featured enough.
Yeah, and one of those loudest voices, I think we can say, we're alluding to the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi. And he's made a ton of media appearances in the United States, but he's not the only opposition voice, as you mentioned. So should U.S. newsrooms be weighing how often he appears? Because with each appearance, his case to maybe one day be in power in Iran becomes more credible.
Absolutely. And we know from reporting by Israeli media that the Israeli government has invested in sort of bringing up the popularity of the former Shah's son, and it has invested in media appearances, in social media support for him, essentially helping manufacture a popularity level that it doesn't match what you actually. He does enjoy some popularity on the ground and also in the diaspora, but it's a lot more hyped. And yes, absolutely. So the amount of media coverage and presence, interviews, etc., and mentions is just it doesn't represent what the actual reality is. And part of it is because of this investment and the push to the media and on the social media that I think the various outlets should be mindful of.
Running out of time, but really quickly, where should someone go to get the best information on what's happening in Iran?
Well, as you said, it's difficult. I would say diversify your sources of news, so don't rely on just American, just French. There are also Middle Eastern outlets. If you can read Farsi or use translation, Iran also has a vibrant media ecosystem. I mean, with some limitations, but a lot of news and information and images are also coming from inside the country, and very brave journalists who are active on social media as well.
Nagar, we have to thank you so much for coming in to speak to Swoop. Nagar Mortazavi, joining us there. That brings us to our.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. And right now, energy is slightly up. It's 96.34 for oil. Resveratrol. This helps to soak up free radicals, improve the health of your mitochondria, increase your energy levels because your mitochondria produces ATP. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression and helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Resveratrol also helps the basal layer of your skin. Resveratrol is a major supplement to slow down the aging process. It stacks really well with Clarity Factor and C60. So please go to my store and get the Resveratrol. Now, C60, you can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and also in avocado oil. Now, C60 is a very potent antioxidant. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach. And this is going to help multiple systems. It soaks up those free radicals and reduces stress, reduces inflammation. The cells will perform better and the mitochondria will produce more ATP. You'll have more energy. You'll have more vitality. Now, taking C60 every day will also help to improve your skin because it helps with the basal layer and it stacks really well with the resveratrol.
Now, C60, by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation because you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. And at the brain function level, by bringing down inflammation, bringing down stress in the neurons are healthier, and the mitochondria in the neuron are healthier, and you're going to be producing more ATP to make neurotransmitters. So over time, what's going to happen is that you'll have more dendritic connections. You'll think faster, you'll have better memory. And your other organ systems will improve, like your immune system and your endocrine system. So please go to my store and get the C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. I've been taking C60 a teaspoon a day, every day, since 2016. Every day. All right, so that's almost 10 years. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take it every day. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Okay, let's listen into Trump administration significantly underestimated Iran Strait of Hormuz closure.
About for decades?
Yeah, look, this is reporting from CNN's Zach Cohen, Phil Mattingly, Kevin Liptak, and Kylie Atwood, and it gets into just how problematic what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz, which of course is one of the world's most important energy chokeholds in the country. It's responsible for 20% of the global crude oil that comes out of that very key waterway. And what they're learning, our colleagues, is that essentially that while key officials from the Department of Energy and the Department of Treasury were present for a lot of these briefings, what is typical in planning for something of this magnitude, an operation, military operation of this magnitude in the Middle East, they said that the agency analysis and forecasts that would be integral elements of the decision-making process in past administrations were secondary considerations here. Now, I think one of the key things is what the administration is actually going to do about this, John. And what we've heard from top officials and what our colleagues are hearing from their sources involved in some of the planning on this is that it could be weeks before the Trump administration's efforts to really try and alleviate the impact of what is happening in the Strait can actually take effect. We have heard many officials kind of talk about the possibility of having the U.S. Navy go in and escort some of these oil tankers and ships through the Strait to make sure they're safer. But that is very high risk. And that is something that we've now heard as well from top officials like the Energy Secretary Chris Wright noting that it can be very dangerous to do that. Meanwhile, we've heard from the president kind of trying to downplay.
This is what I mean about CNN's not on Team America. So they're complaining that the Defense Department and Trump didn't open up the straits and make sure oil's flowing during the war. But then on the next side of their mouth, they start saying that it's high risk for our Navy fleet. Well, don't you think that you should knock out the missile capability, knock out the manufacturing capability, knock out the drones, and degrade the IRGC before you open up the strait? Yeah. Because what if we kept the strait open and our ships got hit? Not only is it bad press and a win for Iran, but we have less ships for our military projection in Asia. So actually, General Kane is being prudent on conducting the war effort the way he is. It is better to degrade the IRGC before the strait is open. Now, it's possible, more than 50% chance, maybe 60% chance, that the strait will be opened up in 2 weeks. That we'll start to see the flow. It probably won't be 100% flow from baseline, but the flow will improve in 2 weeks. About 60% chance. But if it's not, then we're talking about probably 3 months before we see 100% flow. But the thing is that General Kane, it was prudent on the way he's conducting the war to make sure that we don't lose or reduce the risk of losing our naval fleet.
It's better to pay a little bit more at the gas pump and have higher oil prices and have our naval fleet versus trying to make sure that oil tankers are coming through and potentially losing some of our frigates or, maybe a destroyer or whatever. But CNN knows better. Journalists on CNN know better.
What we've seen with energy and what has been happening in the Strait. Now, I do want to reference what we heard from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, yesterday. He was speaking with Sky News, and he said that the escorts from the U.S. Navy will begin, quote, as soon as is militarily possible. He said that was their planning, and there's a chance that the U.S. Navy or perhaps an international coalition could ultimately escort these tankers through. We also heard, just speaking on this idea of preparedness and the lack thereof that our colleagues are reporting on, we did hear from the White House, a spokeswoman, Anna Kelly. This is what she told CNN. She said, through a detailed planning process, the entire administration is and was prepared for any potential action taken by the terrorist Iranian regime. She went on to say that the president has been clear that any disruptions to energy are temporary and will result in a benefit to our country. That has really been the line we've heard from this White House, that what is happening right now with oil is temporary. But all to say, we do know that energy executives as well are kind of trying to play it safe right now. They do not want to be sending their oil tankers through, risking lives, risking their ships at this moment. So this is a problem that is likely going to continue for a long time until the administration can figure out how to safely, escort these ships and reopen the Strait in a way that is safe for everyone. John?
Secretary of Energy Chris Wright told Kay yesterday they were not yet ready to escort these fuel tankers through the Strait.
General, the reporting is that somehow the administration, the National Security Council, the Pentagon maybe underestimated what Iran was willing to do in the Strait. How could that be when I know that a Strait closure has been near doctrine in the U.S. for decades?
John, I was very surprised by those, that reporting as well. In my experience, and I've spent, a couple of decades working in the Central Command area of responsibility to include being part of, the development and the review of the concepts of operations to address the threats.
All right,
that
this guy that's talking on CNN, the network that hates Trump, all right? Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz, retired. Okay, he just mentioned that he was part of war planning for this area. All right? Well, wait a minute here. He's retired, all right? He looks of age where he would have been dealing with the Gulf War. He looks of age, maybe he was a service member even during the tanker wars in the 80s. He looks of age that he probably served in some capacity during the war on terror after 9/11. So I'm not sure what year he retired, but he sure as hell knew a whole lot about the region. All right? And he was part of an administration, part of a military that failed in the Middle East. The last 47 years, including Trump 1.0, Trump 45, failed in the Middle East. Now, finally, we have a president that's willing to kick some ass. And we have generals that are there to actually get the job done. So why are we listening to a failed general on CNN? Why? Oh, because it's the network of let's demonize Pete Hegseth because a lot of people in the Pentagon don't like him. Why? Because he shook it up. He shook up the whole defense industry.
Region and specifically the Strait. So I believe that CENTCOM certainly had this as a potential response option based on offensive operations into Iran. So now the fact that potentially all the capability to start clearing the Strait to allow freedom of navigation, and we may have to have additional capabilities build up to include similar to what we had with Prosperity Guardian to rely on our coalition partners in the Gulf states and our allies from NATO to assist, that may be forthcoming.
Let's listen to what the Secretary just said about the Strait of Hormuz.
They are exercising. I've been doing this better than going on 50 years.
Another Trump hater.
They are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with, we have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it. We're on plan to defeat, destroy, disable all of their meaningful military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen before. The only thing prohibiting transit in the Straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that. Now, there's a reason why we chose as one of our primary objectives to destroy the Navy. We understood the ability to interdict shipping is something Iran has done for 40 years. It's key terrain. They've used it as leverage. The world is seeing what they'll do to fight back in that context. And so we've heard them talk about taking various measures, and we're planning for all of them. So we have a plan for every option here. We're working with our interagency partners, and that's not a strait we're going to allow to remain contested or with a lack of flow of commercial goods. So we're aware of that. We're laser focused on our military objectives, but also want to make sure our partners across this government understand we're working with you to make sure that energy flows. And that's an important part.
Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. It's really become the center of this war right now, and maybe more than anything else, this seems to be bringing the battle home for the American people.
Jake Tapper, another anti-Trumper. All right, dipshit from Dartmouth. I mean, Jake is such a dipshit. But he knows better. He knows better. If he knew better, why is he a anchor on CNN? You don't have to be that smart to be an anchor on CNN. Jake.
Well, do you agree?
Well, absolutely. And a lot of people may be puzzled by it. They say, look, that's a conflict way over there. The United States does produce a lot of oil and gas. So why is the cost going up at my corner gas station? First of all,
because energy is a global market. And stop being an individual that's a slave to the system. All right? This is the reason why I'm doing this channel. I'm telling you how to make money in the news. And also to improve your health, because CNN isn't going to tell you how to improve your health. Sanjay Gupta, MD, physician, he doesn't help you to really improve your health, even though he's a neurosurgeon. He got COVID 100% wrong. CNN isn't telling you how to improve your health. I'm telling you how to do it. And not only that, I do it myself. So the proof's in the pudding. Do I look like I'm in my 50s? No. So, okay, so CNN's not telling you how to improve your health. And CNN isn't really CNN will do an advertisement to have you do, buy a certain good from a multinational corporation. All right? It's probably not even good for you. That's their ad stream, ad revenue. And they get your eyeballs to scare you. And they're saying, well, gas is it's going up. Oil's going up. Oh my God. Well, don't be a slave to the system. Take advantage of it. Buy energy. All right, why is it that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Because they have put themselves in a position to be able to benefit from events, news events, world events. Instead of demonizing the Rothschilds, why don't you sit down and actually watch a fucking documentary about the family and how they were extremely poor, but how did they become one of the wealthiest families ever in human history? oh, it must be a cabal, it must be some sort of, no. It's hard work, being smart, a lot of luck, and being at those moments in time where it's a fork in the road. History can go one way or history can go another way, and you're betting. You're placing your confidence financially in a certain path. That's how they got rich. So instead of fucking whining that your gas price is at $3.50, $4 a gallon, or even $7 or $8 because you're in the land of the fruits and nuts of California because of the taxes on gasoline, instead of whining about it, why don't you pay attention to what I'm telling you? And you'll make money. And you won't be a slave to the system.
Also a big oil and gas region, a lot of petroleum products there, from the UAE to Saudi Arabia, a huge producer, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran itself. And almost all of it has to come through this thin ribbon of water down here and pass through the very tight Strait of Hormuz. About 3,000 ships a month, about 20 million barrels of oil a day. And Iran, as you noted above, Jake, is really putting a lot of military pressure on those ships and, in effect, slamming the gates shut there at the Strait and letting almost nothing through.
We've heard about the effort to mine the Strait, sea mines by the Iranians. What do we know about Iran's ability, their capability to do that?
So see, this is the problem with mainstream media when it comes to CNN and some other networks. They've heard. Where's the confirmation? Where's the confirmation that there's actually a mine? Where is it? Because if you have that information, that should be sent to the Pentagon like pronto. So how can the Pentagon say that there's no evidence of mines being laid? There's no evidence of it. Now it could be, but there's no evidence of it. That's what the Pentagon's saying. But CNN is saying, well, they have information. What's the source? Is it double or triple sourced? Do you have pictures? Do you have video? Did you share it with the Pentagon? No, they'll share it on their website. They'll share it in some news clip that everyone watches to try to demonize the Trump administration. So if they really have this information that mines have been laid, which there's no evidence of, supposedly, but if they have that information, why isn't it being shared with the Pentagon? Why do they say that? Well, they had a source that said this and blah, blah, blah. We have pictures and we shared it with Pete Hegseth. No, they don't do that. No. They just say it. Well, prove it. This is Dartmouth for you. Right here. Jake Tapper, Dartmouth. Piece of shit.
Have a lot of mines, and they're not the old mines that you see in World War II movies. For example, they have this type of mine, which is called an influence mine. This is just one type. This sort of mine is much more modern. It sits underwater, and it basically takes readings on what's passing above, so that if a small boat or ship goes by, it may ignore it. But if a big tanker goes by, and that's what it's been tuned to, that's when it may detonate. It will be enough to destroy it? We don't know. How many are out there? We don't know. But that
uncertainty. So they're just saying that this could be, but we don't know if it is. Well, then maybe you should have a disclaimer saying this is all innuendo. No, this is CNN. I mean, CIA News Network.
So contributing to the notion that none of these ships that ought to be going out are doing so. Jake?
Tom, most of the oil from the Strait goes to Asia, notably to China. So why is it impacting the U.S. this way?
Yeah, almost none of it comes to you.
Oh, because, Jake, I know you're a journalist, but the energy sector, the energy trading is global. And we do export. And not only that, we do import some of this oil. So there's flows both ways. But going into Iran and being able
to align the United States with a secular, democratic country, we will be able to cut the flow of energy to China if we need to, if they invade Taiwan, Jake. I know you're from Dartmouth. I know you have a thick skull. I know you're not very bright, but it is a major chess piece that is being played against the conflict between the United States and China. China. Okay, Jake? And this is the reason why we went into Venezuela first. We had all intentions of knocking out Iran in the Trump administration. This isn't by accident. This isn't just some sort of chaotic event. This was planned. They went into Venezuela first to make sure that the heavy crude could feed Pad 3 refineries in Texas and Louisiana. Because if we didn't do that and we hit Iran, we would have even worse problems with energy costs, because our refineries would be going down in production, if not completely turned off. Okay, Jake? Do you get that? I know you're from Dartmouth, and you need a little bit of time to have it absorb. Okay, Jake?
States. But the problem is oil is traded on a world market. Once it gets out there, it's basically being all mixed together and traded. So if I were to put barrels in the back of our warehouse here and make them represent all the oil being traded in the world, 20% of it is now not passing through the Strait of Hormuz. You simply cannot remove that much from the market without affecting shipping and trade and manufacturing. And yeah, absolutely, what all of you are likely to pay this weekend when you go to gas up your car.
Now that is a clip from CNN talking about the price of gasoline, the price of oil, how it's affecting us at home. And it is so dumbed down that it's for a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. Now you're listening to my channel broadcast, and I'll give you a much more specific way to play this. All right, right now, oil is trading at 97.24. And typically on Fridays, there are oil traders that go in and buy either options or futures, either longing the oil market into the weekend, because there's a lot of event risk that can happen and the oil will spike up. Now, what has been happening for the last 2 weeks is that the Asian session, it usually spikes and then it starts to come back down during a little bit later in the session. And sometimes it comes back up in the European session and then comes back down a little bit. And then in the United States session, it comes back up and then comes back down. So they're trying to play this volatility that's going on with the event risk. So Monday morning, when you can start trading, or pre-market trading, which starts at 7 a.m. in the United States, New York time, you might be able to benefit from that event risk that drove up the energy price. But then it kind of drifts back down. You've seen this. It goes up to 100 or maybe above, and then it comes back down, and then it kind of comes up and then comes back down, and it's been floating around in the 90 range. Right now, it's trading at 97. It's the energy the energy traders are putting in their positions, and a lot of times it starts dying out at about 2 o'clock. All right, so it's like fishing, knowing when the fish come through the river and when to put your fishing pole in. So instead of listening to CNN that talks like you're a 10-year-old, why don't you pay attention to me and you'll actually make money?
please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. And when you do that regularly, you're slowing down the aging process. You're helping with brain function. You're helping with your cardiovascular health. You're boosting up your immune system. You're boosting up your endocrine system. And by bringing down inflammation, you're helping brain function. You're even helping with joint health. So please go to my store, get the heirloom barley, slow down the aging process. And vitamin D3. Instead of listening to CNN, take vitamin D3. Why? Because it's a gene expression cofactor that helps your cells to perform better. It also helps to absorb calcium. And if you do resistance training, you're going to get denser bone. That's really important because in your geriatric years, if you fall and you break your hip, chances are you're going to die in 2 weeks. So it's better to have denser bone. Do some resistance training, take the vitamin D3. Oh, by the way, vitamin D3 also gets rid of cells that are infected. It forces them to go into apoptosis. So it clears the cells. And vitamin D3 helps with cardiovascular health. So it's really important to take. So why don't you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin D3, take it every day, and stop listening to CNN and Jake Tapper. Because he's a dipshit.
Say it's a war. We could double down on definitions, but I think anybody looking at the Middle East is looking at not only a war, but a widening war and an asymmetric war. If you look at what Iran is doing in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, not a war that I think President Trump, self-admittedly, according to today's news, had planned for the possibility that Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz. It's sort of difficult to even say the words because it seemed such an obvious thing even to people just reading the papers that it was always a possibility.
Into the press conference in 18 minutes, the news conference at the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. How alone is America? Where are our allies besides the Charles de Gaulle steaming east?
Look, America's, European allies are lending their bases for defensive purposes. America, non-treaty allies in the Gulf are being hit and are under attack. The new Ayatollah is said that he will go after American interests in the region. So America's allies and partners were not asked to come along until after the strikes began. There was no real process of building a consensus or making the case for war, laying out what might lie ahead. And so now they're scrambling. I think the latest in Europe, of course, is a deep frustration, probably behind closed doors anger that the U.S. is effectively, lifting sanctions on Russia's oil exports.
Well, we heard that from the leadership in Germany. And,
exactly.
I think the FT had that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up, Leslie. Because I wanted to talk about what all of this means for Putin and for Russia. We heard yesterday that Russia has been giving Tehran some intelligence. And now, of course, these sanctions, countries can buy sanctioned Russian crude that's already at sea. What is this doing for Putin's empire?
Well, in the short term, it's certainly helping him. I mean, indirectly, directly with the sale of oil, for sure, but indirectly in that America has its focus elsewhere. That's not only helping Russia, that's also helping China. This is an old story, not a new story. When America has its eyes off the prize, China benefits from the disruption, from America's distraction, from seeing the West at odds with itself, if not torn apart. Russia also. So I think for America's European allies, which quite frankly have gotten very little bandwidth or playtime in this war, this is a terrible turning of the tide.
Right.
They will be impacted much more by gas than by the U.S., as we know, gas prices.
Right.
But it really is, it's coming at a time when they're squeezed at home, when, the war with Ukraine continues. We're not even talking about the war in Ukraine right now. We're only talking about the Middle East.
The Rising Sun across Lake Michigan, Leslie Vingemury in Chicago. We will continue whether we welcome all of you 15 minutes from a press conference of the Pentagon. Of course, Michael Barr will be along with the news, including this horrific crash, I should say, of a flying tanker for the Air Force. Alexis Christoforous with Leslie Vingemury.
Thank you.
Leslie, now we're shifting the talk about this war from intensity to duration. What are you going to be listening for during this press conference that we're awaiting here at the top of the hour from the Defense Secretary?
I have some sort of plan for what to do about the buildup in the Persian Gulf, of how to manage the global political economy, whether they're going to seriously consider escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz and what conditions would need to be met in order for that to be safe. I think, more importantly, what is the plan for ending the war, under what conditions? And what we really need is straight talk on the reality that even when the United States ends the war won't be ended. And so what will the plan be for the period when America is no longer directly striking, but Iran is certainly likely to continue the war? What conditions might Iran ask from the United States and from Israel in order to help stabilize the global political economy and flows of ships through that strait? And what would the U.S. be willing to give? I don't think we're going to hear very much about that last point, but it's clearly what needs to be discussed.
President Trump seems to be digging in his heels. He's not a man who likes to lose or to admit that he's losing. So I'm wondering what an exit ramp might even look like, because we know many lawmakers are now calling for an exit to this war, especially in the year with midterm elections. What might that even look like, Leslie?
I think with President Trump, it's, he's going to be in a quandary. This is not a president that will be in any way, shape, or form pleased to see rising oil prices and perpetual instability if there isn't some sort of negotiation. I think, though, more likely that he will declare, a success in depleting and diminishing Iran's ability to project power externally, and signal that he's going to end strikes, but maybe not. Very hard to predict what will happen. I doubt that he will get into this question of Iran's ongoing leverage, even after that moment.
Leslie, you and I were inflicted with 850 pages of Henry Kissinger. You had to read Diplomacy just to show up. But of course, Vingemury did better than me in class, Alexis. I don't know if you knew that. At the back end of that book, Secretary Kissinger talks about the New World Order reconsidered. What does the Vingemury New World Order look like when this war ends?
At the moment, we're not moving into another order. We've clearly abandoned, the United States has abandoned many of the norms and the laws for, how we govern. It's certainly abandoned the principle that you work very closely with a certain set of pre-agreed allies. We are much more into might makes right, into a heavy transactionalism. But I think the real concern is that we're moving into a period where there isn't an alternative order, where alliances aren't going to be permanent. You're not going to know exactly who your friend or who your enemy is, where deals are done with a variety of partners, some more seemly and less unseemly than others. So unfortunately, we are not seeing our leaders map out an alternative version. We know that Mark Carney has talked about middle powers. I was just in India at the Raisina dialogue, where India is talking about, as it has been, multiple alignments in order to protect its strategic autonomy and enable it to do what it wishes to do, which is to focus on development and poverty alleviation. I think many countries across Europe are going to be adopting a similar strategy. How do you develop multiple alignments with other middle powers on the economic front, I think on the strategic and security front, the West is still going to try to lean into itself. But when the U.S. behaves like this, that makes it very much harder for its Western allies to go along.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has 68 nutrients to help slow down the aging process, improve your brain function, help with your cardiovascular health, help with musculature, rev up your metabolism, increase your energy levels, soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation. This is a very important supplement to take every day. You'll start feeling the effects of this within 72 hours. You'll have a steady burn of energy. You'll be more active. And if you take this for a year, you're going to actually see a major difference in how you are aging. You're slowing down the aging process by taking this. This stacks really well with C60. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. Also, Boomer Boost helps to control your A1C levels. So do some resistance training, get some muscle, take the Boomer Boost, and you're reducing your chances of diabetes. Also, Cleanse and Max 35 are great supplements to take. You can take either one. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. I also have Max 14 parts per million, and Cleanse 30 parts per million. But you take a teaspoon a day every day, all right? Swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow. What this will do is neutralize, improve your oral cavity, also your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. You're boosting up your innate immune system. This is really important. And by doing that, you're slowing down the aging process and you're reducing your chances of contracting colds and stuff like that. All right? But by improving your oral cavity, you're also helping with your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, get the Cleanse, Max 35 or Max 14, take a teaspoon a day every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. You can do that also if you're around someone that's not feeling well. And once everything's all clear, go back to your maintenance dose. So please go to my store, get the Boomer Boost, get the Max 35 or Max 14 Cleanse, and slow down the aging process. All right. Let's listen to the trade representative for the U.S.
Finance the old way. Finance the ramp way.
Something's different. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer are heading to Paris tomorrow to meet with Chinese officials. The meeting coming ahead of President Trump's expected trip to Beijing. And a new wave of Section 301 investigations. Joining us right now is Ambassador Jameson Greer. Good morning to you. Let's start with this meeting, and then we can get into tariffs and everything else. What are you hoping to achieve at this meeting?
It's good to be with you this morning. Like a lot of our meetings we've had with the Chinese over the past year, we want to ensure continued stability in U.S.-China relationships, one of the most important economic relationships in the world. We want to make sure that we continue to get the rare earths we need for our manufacturing base, that they keep buying the kinds of things they should be buying from us, and that the leaders have a chance to get together and make sure that the relationship's going the way we want it to go.
Where do you think that relationship is, given that it's one of the few countries, unlike the others, that actually had reached deals on tariffs? They never reached one. And how does the conversation change given the situation in Iran?
Well, when you look at where we are with China versus 1 year ago, we have a much more balanced relationship with China. I've been saying for a year, where do we want to be with China? We want relations to be stable. We want our trade to be more balanced. We want it to be a non-sensitive goods. And so our trade deficit with China in goods has gone down by 30% over the past year, 3-0. That's a big change. Our imports from China in January were the lowest they've been since 2004. And again, that's not to say we're not going to trade with China. We certainly are, but it's getting to a much more balanced situation.
Can we discuss though this situation with Iran, because clearly that's weighing on our markets, it's weighing on the price of oil, and by the way, weighing on their economy as well.
It is. So when it comes to energy and the effect of the Iran war, it doesn't so much affect U.S.-China economic relations directly between us. Obviously, China relies on oil from Iran. The United States, we're a huge producer of both oil and LNG, but we do export and import a lot. We're a net exporter, but we do import a lot, and we refine here. We import refined products as well. I think what you want to look is what are the feedstocks doing in China, because some of these hydrocarbons go into the plastics industry, the chemicals industry in China. I think we're more resilient on that front because we have a lot of domestic feedstocks and hydrocarbons. So we'll be watching how that might affect the Chinese economy and their ability to produce at the huge volumes they've been producing over the past several years.
What is your expectation for how quickly this war in Iran is going to end? And if it doesn't, what do you think the global impact is going to be?
Well, I think that we're talking in terms of weeks, right? When I speak with Secretary Hegseth or the president or others, they're much closer to it. But obviously, you can't talk about trade without the Iran war coming up and the effect of oil and gas and what that means. I think we're talking about a matter of weeks. Our expectation is that any effects we see will be short-lived. But we want to watch this, right? You could see other effects that affect cycles that we tend to see in commodity markets. So we're watching it very closely, especially in if there are particular spikes or if there are areas where we think we have more resilience.
Which piece of this so far was not on your bingo card in terms of expectations? And I only ask this because I think when the attack was first made, there was a sense that this was going to end very quickly. I don't want to say it was going to be a cakewalk, but I think there was a view that it would be something more akin to that, and it clearly is getting more complicated rather than less, despite whatever successes we seem to be having.
Well, I don't work in the Pentagon. I used to serve in the military many years ago, but all I know is the Pentagon for years and decades has been planning for these kinds of contingencies. We saw the president and his security team execute historic victories in Venezuela. We saw what they did with Iran and the Fordo site last year. I have full confidence in the team that they've planned out all the different scenarios, not just the military scenarios, also the economic scenarios. Again, I think that they're looking at a matter of weeks. When I talk to the secretary, we talk about their levels of, missile launches and drones. All that has gone down by 80, 90%. There's a finite amount of ordnance over there that the Iranians have. And, Pete and others are in a better position to talk to you about it. But that's how it looks from my perspective.
Ambassador Greer, there was a court filing where a Customs and Borders Protection official said that the government is somewhere between 40 and 80% towards building a system to refund the more than $165 billion that in tariffs that were collected that were then ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. They said that they expect that system to be up and running by the middle of next month. They have an online claim portal where I guess importers and brokers will submit their requests for refunds along with interest. Is there a chance that U.S. taxpayers will lose money on the tariffs that were instituted to try and bring money in if we are paying back those very tariffs with interest?
Well, remember, Democratic attorneys general, they argued for these cases. They asked for the money to go back to companies that were importing goods. That was their ask to the court, and they got their wish, was to take money from the U.S. Treasury that could have been used to pay down the debt or other things and give it back to companies who import foreign goods made by foreign workers. So first of all, there is money going out of the Treasury, or that could, and it's because Democratic attorney general wanted that. Interest payments, those are par for the course if that happens. Anytime the government has to refund money or anything like that, there's always some kind of interest associated with it.
But it's U.S. taxpayer dollars that would be used to fund the interest if that's the case.
Well, I don't know where Treasury is going to have that. I don't know where they think that interest funds are. I'll talk to Scott. The point is that
the news anchor is not asking the right question. A lot of the taxes, a lot of the tariffs that the consumer paid, the end consumer paid,
aren't going to be refunded. So these companies shouldn't get 100% of the tariff. They should only get a certain percentage once they can prove that a certain product, they passed on the cost to the consumer only 50% or whatever it is. Some companies pass 100% of the tariff to the end consumer, and some companies ate all of the tariff. So there's a wide range here. Well, if the company ate the tariff and didn't pass it on to the end consumer, then the company should get 100% reimbursement. But if they passed 50% of the tariff to the consumer, then the consumer should get 50% of it with interest and 50% to the company. But what's going to happen is that the corporation is going to get all of the tariff. And the end user has paid tariff and doesn't get any reimbursement. That's not fair. That's just not fair. That's the real issue here, not the interest being paid.
Attorneys General of democratic states, they wanted this money to go back to companies who are importing foreign goods, and they got their wish.
Ambassador, would you and the administration encourage companies that had higher costs during this period to seek refunds, that paid tariffs to seek refunds? And I ask because I've talked to a number of CEOs who have thus far been holding off seeking those refunds, worried potentially about the possibility for retribution for seeking such a thing.
What about giving the reimbursement to the consumer, Jackass?
And somehow they get this windfall. The most important thing and the smartest thing they should do is give it as bonuses to their workers. The whole reason the president imposed these tariffs was to try to reshore, to fix our massive imbalance in trade that we've experienced over many years because of China, Vietnam, the EU, and others. If the companies are going to get this windfall, they should pass it along to their workers as a bonus or a raise, because that's the purpose of the program. It's always been the purpose of the program, and the American people should get it, and the companies should give it to their workers.
In terms of the next stage of these tariffs, 301 and otherwise, these investigations that are taking place, how quickly do you think those investigations take place? What kind of reports need to come out of them? And then how quickly can those tariffs be implemented?
So the Section 3 program, these are the types of investigations that USTR, my agency, has done in the past. They're very process-driven, they're transparent, there's an opportunity for hearing, for public comment, and then we typically produce some findings. It could be in the form of a report or otherwise. And if we find that countries have been involved in unfair trading practices like subsidies, excess capacity, allowing goods made with forced labor into their countries, we can quantify that harm to U.S. commerce and then try to resolve that issue with the country. If they can't resolve it or don't resolve it sufficiently, you can impose a tariff or fee or something like that. We're trying to move very quickly to your question. We're trying to move in a matter of months. And with that, we can try to resolve some of these issues that have been plaguing the global trading system for many years, and we're finally trying to solve.
All right, let's listen into BBC. This is an ex-military British guy, really, really informative.
Now, you may have heard of a very small rocky outcrop island about 15 nautical miles off the coast of Iran called Karg Island. What is its significance, and why are the US making plans to potentially try and seize it? Hi, my name is Mikey Kay from the BBC's Security Brief, also a former strategic military planner in the British military. So why is Karg Island so strategically important to the US? Why are the US trying to seize it? Well, this is why. 90% of Iran's export crude oil comes through that island. 90%. And the reason for that is it's effectively a terminal. And the terminal allows very large tankers that can carry up to 85 million gallons of oil to be able to come up to the terminal quite easily and then come back down the Persian Gulf and out of the Straits of Hormuz out to China. China is the main user of Iranian oil. So why else is it important? It's also the economic lifeline to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. And if you take that island and you hold it, then you're effectively cutting off their lifeline, their ability to be able to conduct war. Now, there's been a lot of chatter both in open source intelligence and online about the Americans drawing up what's called a concept of operations, a CONOP. And a CONOP basically means different courses of action or different ways that the Americans could use their military capability to try and seize that island. So how does that work? Well, we all saw the 160th Night Stalkers in Venezuela. That wasn't just about a helicopter assault operation to pick up Maduro. There were a lot more capability and assets involved. You had suppression of enemy air defense. That's aircraft that effectively can look at the radars of anti-aircraft missiles, and basically as soon as the radar turns on, they can launch a missile off the rail to target that air defense system. You've then got intelligence, so Reapers, MQ-9 Reapers, drones effectively with really sharp electro-optic cameras and forward-looking infrared cameras that need to be able to sanitize the area. And then, of course, you have the helicopters themselves. The helicopters would need to be probably the MH-47 Chinook. That has the biggest range and also can carry the biggest troops. The troops involved would likely be Delta Force, which is the same unit that took part in the Maduro operation. And then you have the MH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. That's more about suppressing enemy fire. It's more about protecting the MH-47s as they take Delta Force and the Special Force operators in to seize the island. So how would that work? Well, it's 140 nautical miles from Karg Island to the coast of Kuwait. And helicopters generally travel at about 120 knots, which is 2 miles a minute. That makes it a 70-minute transit from the coast of Kuwait to Karg Island. However, when the aircraft get there, it's not like they're dropping off and then they're returning straight away. They would have to drop off, and then the MH-60s would likely go into what's called racetracks and orbits. Now, they would be there to lay down suppression of enemy fire in case there was Iranian guard corps on the island that were looking to defend it. So all in all, with a 70 nautical mile transit to Karg Island and a certain amount of loiter time, let's call it 40 minutes, and a 70 nautical mile transit back, that's 3 hours in the air. So we're now looking at refuel options. While there is an airbase, or certainly a runway on the island, there would be fuel at that airbase. But if I'm IRGC and I know the Americans were coming, I would probably contaminate that fuel. So as a US operational commander, I wouldn't trust it. But there is another option. Both these helicopters, the MH-47 and the MH-60, they have the ability to air-to-air refuel. What do the Iranians have that could potentially defend that island? Well, conventionally, they've got ballistic missiles and they've got anti-shipping missiles. But the problem with ballistic missiles is that you don't want to cause collateral damage to the oil export infrastructure on Karg Island. The Iranians are the masters at asymmetric warfare, asymmetry. So they don't want to destroy things, they want to degrade things. They want to draw this out for as long as possible. And they're using a low cost-benefit ratio. And what that means is that their equipment is very simple and it's mass-produced, and they can produce it easily. So in terms of an asymmetric threat, what does Iran have? Well, it's got what's called go fast. They're fast attack boats, fast attack craft. You might even see two people on a jet ski, one of them driving and one of them with a rocket-propelled grenade on the back. The point being is they're hard to target and there can be lots of them. What else does it have? Well, it's got the Shahed 136 drone. That is ubiquitous. The Iranians are thought to have over 50,000 of these Shahed 136s. Once again, not hard to target as a singleton, but when you put them up in swarms, it can overwhelm air defenses. And then you've got mines. The problem with mines is that the Iranians have a lot of them. They're not particularly sophisticated, but what they do is they cause a massive problem for any US maritime patrol vessels coming into the area. And why is that? Well, because as soon as the Iranians say that they've mined Karg Island, it's then up to the US to prove that the Iranians haven't. And that takes a lot of time, manpower, and resource. The other thing as well is you've got tidal currents inside the Persian Gulf. So even if the US could clear a certain area of the ocean through mine clearance using mine hunters, the currents will then bring other mines back into that area. So there is actually no way on the map of being able to discern and protect a certain area where US vessels can go through. So does this idea of the US assaulting and seizing Karg Island bring in other players? Now, we already know that China are providing large cargo aircraft that have been coming into Iran post-Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. What they've been bringing into Iran, we don't know. But there are ideas that it could be bringing in ballistic missile capability, surface-to-air missile capability, anti-shipping capability, and also radar systems that aren't as vulnerable to those suppression of enemy air defense aircraft than we think. So they're certainly supporting Iran right now. We know that the US is trying to degrade and destroy Iran's ability to make military capability, its defense industrial base. So if it can seize Khan Island, does it have the capability to defend it without damaging the infrastructure? And if it does, what is that going to do to global oil prices? And what's the potential for other actors, such as China, to get involved?
With Canva AI, you'll never design alone again. Just tag in Canva for instant design feedback and suggestions, all from within the engine, so you won't break your workflow. Enjoy creative confidence with Canva AI. Try it today.
National University, the perfect school for his bachelor's degree. National University's 4-week courses with monthly starts, free tutoring, and accredited online and hybrid options. He's ready for what's next. National University. Learn more at nu.edu.
We are at a very dangerous point, in a sense, because I think militarily the Iranian regime has clearly, I think, lost the war, but they haven't lost their ability to do damage to the neighbors, to the international commerce, and to the people of Iran. And how this will unfold, I think, will have a great deal to do with the future of not just Iran, but the entire Middle East.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. This will help to build strength, do some resistance training. This will help with building up those muscles and building strength. This will also help to bring down inflammation so you recover quicker, and soak up free radicals, detoxify your body. It's a great way to get healthy and to slow down the aging process. And by bringing down inflammation, detoxifying, and soaking up free radicals, you're helping your endocrine system, your immune system, even your cardiovascular system and brain function. And Myotrol helps with gene expression to build muscle. This is really important. If you're 40 years of age or older, male or female, do some resistance training. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. It also helps the health of the mitochondria, so you have the energy to maintain the muscle. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you can benefit from Myotrol to gain strength in your sport. You can take them separately, or you can take them together for a synergistic benefit. Please go to my store, get the Myotrol and the Gladiator Barley. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Al Jazeera here.
Makes it easier for India to kind of transact with their Russian suppliers, but in the long term, I don't think that it has a huge impact in terms of volume of supplies. I think still there will be some degree of deficits because Middle Eastern supplies are large. So if we are trapped into this conflict in the Middle East with the Straits of Hormuz being locked, then there will be some shortage.
This is all part of Iran's strategy. It was to block this particular energy choke point so that many different parts of the world would feel cost and pain from this war, and that would, in Iran's view, increase pressure on the U.S. to end the war. I wonder, just from your perspective, do you think that can work? Because India feeling pain and other parts of the world feeling energy pain is exactly what Iran was hoping for.
That absolutely is going to work. And you can see that, Russian foreign and economic policy is also singing from the same hymn sheet. If I'm not mistaken, about 3 days ago, a Russian president commented to the media saying that Russia will be completely stopping its supplies of energy and energy-related products to the EU, what he described as unfriendly countries, towards the east. And his argument was that the EU and the unfriendly countries are looking to cut themselves off from Russian energy supplies by 2027 anyway. So his advice to Russian companies were, these supplies should be diverted sooner rather than later. Now, the point is that, for Asian countries, they will not be able to meet their demand only through Russian supplies, and there will be a disruptive effect. Longer this conflict goes on, Europe will feel the pain, and obviously, given the high level of debt and macroeconomic challenges, it is quite likely that we will be looking towards higher energy price, inflation, and a recession, and that can then lead to financial crisis.
Joining us from Brighton, Sandeep Bhattacharya. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
The bodies of 84 Iranian Navy personnel killed aboard a warship off the coast of Sri Lanka are being repatriated. A chartered flight is expected to leave Makala Airport near Gaul, but officials say talks are continuing over whether the survivors of the incident will also be returned to Iran. A U.S. submarine torpedoed the warship last week. Washington has asked Sri Lanka not to repatriate the Iranian crew. And as we've been reporting, many ships have been stuck on either side of the Strait of Hormuz because of the war in the Middle East. That has also upended the lives of thousands of Filipino sailors who form the backbone of the commercial shipping industry. Jamila Alindagan reports from Manila.
Around 1 in every 4 seafarers in the world is from the Philippines. They work on ships that carry oil, food, and goods across the world, including through critical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, where the Iran war is disrupting transit. It often takes 4 to 5 years of study at a maritime academy. Training centers like Mariana Academy in Manila has prepared thousands of sailors for international shipping lines. For many of them, it will lead to some of the world's most dangerous sea lanes. Rodolfo de Andante has been working on shipping vessels for nearly 20 years. He says there is a reason Filipino maritime workers are sought after.
Being horizontal rental, you give us something to do, and we will do it with excellent for you. Okay, and we don't compromise safety.
Louie Tarantan hopes to follow the same path.
I've always wanted to become a seafarer. I work hard to prove myself.
Do anything but HR. That's what I tell my kids.
Don't drink from a fire hose. Paycor's HCM streamlines people management from hire to retire and everything in between.
The region entirely and diverting around Africa instead. Amita Miller reports from Cape Town.
Disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz are forcing shipping companies to rethink how goods and energy move around the world. Now, that's where other shipping routes may come in. Instead of moving through the Gulf and onto the Mediterranean via the Suez Canal, some vessels are taking the much longer journey around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. But the longer route increases travel by 3,000 to 5,000 nautical miles. That's 10 to 14 extra days of travel. That means higher fuel costs. In total, this detour adds about $1 million in extra costs per trip. Now, while port authorities here at the Cape Town port say they're ready to handle the additional traffic, ships that may take the Cape route are not stopping at these ports. It would take up too much time and cost more. The rerouting might offer some benefits to African ports, but that will be far short of the extra costs for shipping companies and their clients. Amita Miller, Al Jazeera, Cape Town.
Let's take a look at other global stories. Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel says his government has held talks with the U.S. to discuss its blockade against the country. It has cut off Cuba's oil supplies from Venezuela and Mexico, crippling the economy and triggering a humanitarian crisis. No fuel has entered Cuba in 3 months. The gradual decline of diesel reserves and fuel made the electrical grid increasingly unstable. Our Latin America editor, Lucia Newman, reports from Washington, D.C.
Cuba is, I would say, a harder nut to crack, perhaps, than Venezuela. They say that they are, and they have recognized today for the very first time that there are talks taking place with the United States, but they say it's about resolving their common differences, not about behavior change. Now, keep in mind that today, Diaz-Canel, the president of Cuba, also announced that they were releasing more than 50 prisoners after talks, he says, with the Vatican, that this was a gesture to the Vatican, but not to the United States. There is still wiggle room. There is room for some things to change, opening up economic possibilities, opening up tourism for the United States, but actually changing the political system of the country or letting, as Donald Trump says, a friendly takeover of Cuba take place is another thing altogether. We'll have to see. But the Cubans right now are not anxious to do that. And in fact, Diaz-Canel contradicted President Trump, who says that these talks have been taking place for a long time and that they're well advanced. He says that they're just beginning, that it's going to be a slow process and that they'll have to see what happens.
The Afghan government has accused Pakistan of targeting civilian homes in overnight airstrikes. A spokesman says military aircraft bombed Kabul and the southern province of Kandahar, killing women and children. This is the latest flare-up in months of hostilities between the neighbors. Pakistan says Afghanistan supports armed groups that carry out attacks on its territory, an accusation that Kabul denies. Displaced Palestinians who fled Israeli strikes have returned to Gaza City to find their temporary shelters destroyed. The Israeli army bombed their tents on Wednesday. Israel has continued to carry out attacks across the Strip, despite agreeing to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire last year. The health ministry says Israeli strikes have killed more than 650 Palestinians since the truce deal came into effect. That was in early October. And today marks the fourth and final Friday of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, a day with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Palestinians would usually make their way to prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem. But this year, Israeli authorities have emptied the compound. Friday also marks Quds Day, or Jerusalem Day, observed by many as a reminder of a city increasingly under attack. Neda Ibrahim reports from Kalandia, near Jerusalem.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink it with filtered water, do that daily to detoxify your body. When you do that, you're going to improve your immune system, your endocrine system, and your other organ systems. Please go to my store and get the zeolite. Also, I have a great supplement here to relieve pain. Muscle aches, headaches, tension headaches, even joint pain. Get the super strong relief. You apply it on your skin, and within 30, 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, the pain will go away completely or radically diminished. So for temporary relief for pain, please go to my store and get the super strong relief. All right, let's listen into Quest Means Business. He interviewed a former Royal Navy officer about the Strait of Hormuz and the military aspects to the strait.
Thomas Cottrell, who served as Royal Navy officer for 27 years, senior advisor to Corvis. He's with me. Good to see you, sir. Let's talk about mining. What's being put in the water?
I need to see confirmed that mines have gone in the water. There may be confusion here over pre-positioning of mines. The Iranians have 5,000 roughly in their stockpile. They have a raft of converted fishing boats that look exactly like fishing boats. They open the barrels as a rail and the mines go in the water. So they can deploy these things very quickly, but they have to get them in position.
Right. So what are these mines?
But I mean, think World War II horned mines, a lot of them, literally metal spheres bobbing in the water with contact horns.
Really?
Now, they range from there, the free float, to moored versions of that, to some quite sophisticated ones of Russian origin and Chinese origin. Obviously, they're more difficult to move around without being detected.
And are they, sorry, this is a naive question, but are they as serious a threat as they sound?
Yes, and the problem with mines is that sometimes you don't even need to lay them. And today may be a case study of saying you've laid them, and it has the same effect. But the reality is they will hold you below the waterline, and unless you're a warship with lots of watertight compartments, you could get serious damage as a result.
So what would you do?
You've got to go in and clear them, and that takes a long time. And like everything else in the Straits of Hormuz, in order to get in there to clear the mine threat, you've got to create the conditions, and that involves taking down their other threats, surface and air threats.
Right, now let's talk about this. So we please have a map of the Strait of Hormuz in the main. We can talk about it as we go through it. We know this is the chokehold. We know that nothing's moving. We know it's geographically very difficult and that there are ships now at anchor and stranded on either side. This idea of escorting through, is it realistic?
It all depends on the threat. I mean, I know this is a sort of how long is a piece of string question, so there's not a satisfactory answer to it. If you can write down the threats in the air, surface and subsurface domain to an extent where you're content to go in and take that risk, then yes, it is. If you can't, then you have to go in very heavy, and then it stops being sustainable, and you can't do it for long.
Right, but the chief executive of Maersk earlier on this program says, listen, I don't care what guarantees, I don't care what insurance or escorting, I'm not putting my men and women at risk on my container ships because it's just not, it's not on.
And I think that's critical. The military will go, well, we've cleared it. But okay, fine, that's only part of the equation. You've then got to convince the entire community that it is cleared to their satisfaction. And we know from the Bab el-Mandeb and the Houthi threat, which was not dissimilar, that there can be a discrepancy between those two things.
The ships that are going there, let's just talk about the Royal Navy, if I may, since we're in London and you are a former officer in that. I'm just reading your article that you wrote, your article that you wrote. Is it really that bad that there are no ships? The Prince of Wales is goodness knows what. There's no frigates. A couple of is it really that bad?
I'm afraid it is. This is 30 years of decline, and of course it doesn't play out at a moment of your choosing. In fact, it plays out at the worst possible moment, and so it is.
So when the magazine, the Paris Match, the French magazine, the political editor wrote, with no ships to accompany it, the British forces may have to ask France for help. What if Napoleon sounded defeated in 1805 to get his revenge 220 years later?
The French are never backwards in coming forwards when it comes to exploiting these, and we've done it as well. It works both ways, particularly at the political level, where the jockeying can sometimes get a bit sort of difficult. But in this case, they're right to do so. You know, they're protecting our sovereign base in Cyprus until HMS Dragon gets there. If we send a carrier, then we have to allocate Dragon to the carrier. I mean, that's sort of allied effort.
But how did they get it so wrong?
Yeah, well, so look, it's 30 years, both governments not prioritising defence over welfare, education, NHS, all the things that we know and love and hope for. Defence has never been one of them. And now the opportunity has created itself to reverse that decline, and we're still not taking it.
Okay, well, not yet, anyway, not with the NATO increased expenditure. And even if you do, ships are much, the cost and the length versus planes and infantry is much greater, isn't it? Final thoughts, I just want to get back to the Straits, and we've not only got problems down the Strait of Hormuz, you've got the Houthis down at the bottom, you've got the Red Sea difficulties, all of which, yet oil is down at $90 a barrel. But my guess is that the risk is very much on the upside.
Absolutely, and the commodities traders are looking at this minute by minute, looking for answers, looking to predict whether they go, long. And the spike last night, of course, scared everyone. That was immediately sort of appeased by rhetoric out of the White House. I think the general assumption is that the longer this goes on, the more that price goes up and the more it affects us at home. So we need to find a way of clearing it, either by persuasion and diplomacy or by forcing our way in there militarily.
Would you sail through the Strait of Hormuz? As a warship, yes, because that's your job. But as a container ship?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put my crew at that level of risk. Why would you? Why not wait until there's assurances in place that it's safe to do so? At the moment, it's not safe to do so, which is why they're not.
Gosh, I'm very grateful you came to talk to us. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
I love that I can take an 80-page.
Alrighty. See France 24 here.
Actually, there was no voice and there was no video. It was a.
This is France 24.
Hello, you're watching Talking Europe. The EU's immediate response to the US Israeli attack on Iran was similar to its initial reaction to the Trump administration's kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, monitoring the situation closely and staying in close contact with regional powers. In both cases, it's hard to escape the impression that the EU lacks hard power, or is perhaps unwilling to use the levers that it does have. Some today are recalling a phrase said by a Belgian foreign minister in the 1990s about the EU being an economic giant, but a political dwarf. And when it comes to Iran, we're also seeing divisions between EU member states similar to what we saw during the Gaza crisis. Well, for this episode, I'm joined by two MEPs from the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Iran. Hannah Neumann is a German Green MEP, and she is the chair of that delegation. Hello to you. And we're also here with Michalis Hadji-Pantela, a Cypriot MEP from the European People's Party. Welcome to you as well. I'd like to start with you because obviously Cyprus has been directly affected with these drone attacks. What's the mood there, and what do you think of these Iranian assertions that these are actually false flag operations or provocations?
Listen, the mood in Cyprus is very good. We are very happy with the support we got from European Union countries. We have support from Greece, France. You've heard that Emmanuel Macron and the Prime Minister of Greece, Konstantinos Mitsotakis, visited Cyprus. We have support from Spain, Holland and England. So this is something that, to be honest, was not expected a few years ago. But this shows that Europe can give solidarity to small member states like Cyprus. I think the situation in Cyprus is very good. It's not, it's over exaggerated in the media.
So when they talk about maybe an invocation of the EU's collective defence clause, that's
I don't think this is at the table at the moment.
Hannah Neumann, just on the sort of big picture, how do you think the EU has handled this? Has it really risen to the occasion here?
I would say we are on the pathway to rise to the occasion. We have indeed seen, especially the first 1 or 2 days, a bit of a prism of responses to the escalation. But if I look at what de facto the messaging is right now, we are moving much closer, and there's quite a broad unity on, I mean, clearly saying everybody wants this regime, the Iranian regime, to be gone, and everybody really shows solidarity with the situation in the Gulf, where they are being attacked by the Iranians. It is quite clear that we need to work towards a de-escalation together with our partners in the Gulf, and everybody's reaching out to Trump, to the Israelis, to tell them, what is your goal, what is your strategy? And I think that you already mentioned that in the case of Cyprus, it is also crucial that we work together to increase European resilience to the high rising energy prices, but also, I mean, to the situation with the delivery chains and along the Strait of Hormuz.
We'll come back to energy. That's obviously a crucial concern for Europeans. But I want us to take a quick listen to EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who caused a bit of a stir with the following comments. Let's take a listen.
Europe can no longer be a custodian of the old world order. For a world that has gone and will not return. We will always defend and uphold the rules-based system that we helped to build with our allies. But we can no longer rely on it as the only way to defend our interests. We need to be prepared to project our power more assertively.
Something that used to terrify me in my business was doing my finances. So now I use Zero. It generates a lot of reports that help me make sound decisions. When I think I'm slow, I can look at Zero, and Zero's like, no, you're still doing good.
Something's different. I'm changing. I don't know if I like who I'm becoming.
There are a lot of people wanting to know what happened down there.
Where's Dad? Why is he back in?
We need to talk.
All right. There's new breaking news. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has launched new missiles.
In Beirut, we're seeing the aftermath. Tell us what you know. I know that there have been developments really across the Lebanese capital today.
Cyril, well, I know just that the Israelis put out again an evacuation order for districts in the southern suburbs about half an hour ago, sort of a reminder that those areas should be evacuated. Remember that they are pretty much empty of human inhabitants now. They've been evacuated for a long time because most of the people who live there make up some of the 800,000 plus internally displaced people here in Lebanon. It is the first strike we've seen on there today. Actually, it's been a comparatively quiet day in the southern suburbs of Beirut until then. There were other airstrikes that you already mentioned in the south of Lebanon, including that one in Sidon that killed 8 people. Now, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, 773 people have been killed since this fighting began. And worth comparing with figures coming from Israel, who say that they killed 360 Hezbollah fighters. So even if you take those Israeli figures as accurate, that means that 413 people who they've killed are not classified as Hezbollah fighters. Cyril.
And Noor, in this ongoing fight between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel, of course, has been attacking, we're still watching the aftermath now, attacking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, in the capital Beirut, also in the eastern parts of the country, in the Bekaa Valley, and Israel is also taking damage and incoming fire from Hezbollah.
It most certainly is, and this is the criticism that the Israeli government is facing. Now, remember, Sarah, there was a ceasefire in place, a one-way ceasefire, actually announced in November 2024. Israel announced victory. The Israeli prime minister said Hezbollah was set back at least 2 decades, that it couldn't hurt Israelis anymore. The tens of thousands of Israelis that had fled northern communities in Israel went back, started rebuilding. Well, now dozens of homes are damaged because once Israel launched the attack on Iran, once Israel opened the war front on Hezbollah, all the brakes were off, and Hezbollah was returning fire and firing at those northern communities, at military and intelligence assets that are strewn across the entire north of Israel. There are calls for evacuation of those communities. The government is not going that route. It is extending the state of emergency. There will be no schools next week. It is taking the heat, and it's not promising that this will end anytime soon. The Israeli government is telling the military, is telling the residents, this will go on for weeks. This war will outlast that on Iran, possibly beyond April.
Bernard, back to you in Beirut. Something I know you've been monitoring. The Israeli Air Force has been dropping leaflets over the Lebanese capital. What for, and what do they say?
Yeah, it's part of their pressure campaign, really, on the Lebanese. These leaflets were dropped this afternoon over central Beirut, telling people, essentially, obviously written in Arabic, telling people they must disarm Hezbollah, Iran's shield. If you want to be part of real change and contribute to the prosperity and protection of your country, we are here to listen to you. And there's a QR code for people to click, which the Lebanese army has warned links directly to Israel's security service. But what Israel is doing is, as part of its campaign of applying pressure on the Lebanese public and the Lebanese government with these leaflets, and also striking at areas outside traditional Hezbollah areas. Israel is increasing that pressure because they are, it's a very sectarian society here in Lebanon, and there are risks of causing sectarian friction as airstrikes are in areas not traditionally of Hezbollah support. And then Israel adds these leaflets to it as well. It piles on the pressure on the Lebanese government to try and disarm Hezbollah, which it hasn't yet done.
All right, thank you very much to Norodeh in Ramallah, Bernard Smith in Lebanese capital Beirut. Thank you. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in Beirut, where he has met with President Joseph Aoun and Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri. Guterres is urging all sides to come to the table and stop fighting.
My message is very clear. We must stop this war. We must have an immediate ceasefire. And my appeal to both parties is, let's do an immediate ceasefire. Let's stop.
Nope. The Iranian regime must die. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This will help your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your bone density, even joint health. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. You can take it separately or you can take it with the collagen, but get also the collagen. This will help to remodel joints if you've had a sports injury or just getting older and you're having problems with your cartilage. Now, how collagen works is that you take 2 large droppers of fluid and put it underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. All right, do this daily. And what this will do is that it's going to help to remodel the joint by using type 2 collagen and ACAN. ACAN helps the cushioning of the joint. The collagen, the type 2 collagen, will help to remodel the cartilage. This collagen will also help to inhibit 3 different enzymes. One enzyme causes pain, so it wants to inhibit that pain. So it blocks EP4. But it also blocks the enzymes that erode the joint, which is MMP3 and MMP13. In addition, collagen helps to recruit glucosamine to help to remodel the cartilage, and to use chondroitin to help to cushion the joint. All right, so this is a great way to remodel. Take some time, you work that joint that you have, maybe an elbow or a shoulder, and you do a little bit of resistance training, a lot of stretching, right? And a great way to do it to help rebuild your joints is, let's say you had a elbow issue, all right? And you have a hard time extending it. And let's say your pain for extension, you can open it only maybe
to 90 degrees, okay? So no pain and then pain, all right? What you want to do is you want to go a little bit beyond the pain mark, maybe a few degrees, all right? And hold it there for about 10 to 20 seconds. And do that 2 times a day, all right? Or 3 times a day, all right? And over time, by taking the collagen and doing this little workout, you will eventually get to the point where you're gonna be able to open it up completely. But it may take weeks, if not months, to eventually get this to open up, and then the pain will be lessened. All right. So, and then once you're able to do that, then you add a little bit of weight, very lightweight, nothing heavy, and you do something similar. If you have pain, you open it up to the point of the pain, and then hold it a little bit more for about 20 seconds, and then release. Do that 2 or 3 times a day. And eventually what will happen is that you're rebuilding the musculature, you're rebuilding the joint, you're stretching out also your tendons and ligaments. And by doing this, over time, you'll be able to reduce the joint problem that you have, all right? It's important to take care of it right away so you don't erode all of the joint. Because if you erode all of your cartilage and you don't have any cushioning within the joint, then you're talking about a much bigger problem that needs surgery. But you want to catch it right away and allow for the body to remodel and heal. And you can do that with the collagen, doing that little workout that I just mentioned on whatever the joint problem that you have, and taking the collagen. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take my advice, slow down the aging process, help support the channel by sharing the links, getting the great products I offer. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for listening. That's the end of my broadcast, and have a nice day.